Hello, everybody. Welcome. For those of you following along with me in the UK, stay cool. That's all I can say. Holy shit, it's it's a crazy year. Good afternoon and good evening to all of you joining me. We're going to be reading 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 today. So, got 5 chapters to go through. Might as well kill a bunch of time because there's a lot of Comic Con news that's coming out that we're going to have to talk about tomorrow on Anime Church. So, really looking forward to seeing what you guys think of all that. Uh, yeah, it's crazy. Crazy. But yeah, oh my god, we're going to be getting more rain later today. Okay. So that'll kind of cool things off a little bit. The only reason we've stayed in the 90s on the Fahrenheit scale, here where I live, the only reason we've been staying in and around that temperature and not in the triple digits, is because we've been getting rain almost consistently, almost every day, and so we've been getting a lot of rainfall, but that's just made the humidity just shoot up, and we're already a really humid area. Tennessee has high humidity. It's a thing. The world's on fire. How are you guys doing? All right, so I'm here to help us get distracted from that by going from one set of bad news to another set of bad news, because shit in the book is getting real. If you guys remember, last time around we read the terrifying diary of future Rudius and how terribly things went. Rudy had a talk with, of course, both his wives about Eris, and he's gonna send out that letter, and he's on his way to talk to Nanahoshi, I think, about Orsted, because he went in his dream and the man god showed up, and he was kind of pissed and bummed out that Rudy managed to save Roxy and and of course Roxy and Rudius's kid, and that became a big focal point. Rudy wants to keep his family safe, and the man god said, okay, well, just kill Orsted then. And that's kind of where we left off. So that's where we'll be picking back up. So just gonna jump Oldius, as he's commonly called. Oldius, okay. Could it be that Satan has shown up to visit and brought his hellfires with him? No, it's not biblical. Man did this. Man is the one at fault. Don't blame it on figmentary, imaginary beings and constructs. Mankind did this to itself because greed. Because money's more important than life. And we all know this is the way that the world runs. Why are we surprised? All right, there's my cynical take on the universe. Well, at least Earth. I don't know if there are other spacefaring cultures out there, or just other cultures in general, out in the wide, broad universe. But, yeah, dude. Hopefully they treat their planets better than we do. If they do indeed exist. All right. That having been said, without getting too much into the politics and all that other stuff, if you guys play Genshin, I have recently been jumping back into that. I've been helping Lady Chan. I had to get a new account. Basically, she got given a backup account by one of her friends, and I've been helping her run through that and do some side stuff and get primos. And I've been playing a lot more because I'm getting ready. I'm making sure that, well, number one, I wanted Kazuha. I wanted more Kazuha. So I'm at C4. If I can get C5, I think I'll be good. I did not realize that I jumped in the Spiral Abyss, and I did not realize how easy it is for my second team to get their ass kicked, because their artifacts were shit. So I've been trying to farm more artifacts and get better artifacts and stats and stuff. And it's kind of bumming me out because I'm going from her account back to my account, and her account has much better artifacts because this dude just like, I don't know how much this person spent their time on artifact farming, but they have a lot of 5 stars that have really good stats and substats. And I'm just sitting here like, shit. Of course, I think they use a lot of condensed resin because if you use condensed resin for artifact domains, you tend to get better stats. So, yeah, that's one of the things I've been doing. And I've been leveling up some more of the people, ascending them and getting them up there. So, yeah, definitely going to need help with all of that. If you guys want to help out with that, or if you just want to play the game with me, yeah, I will hit me up in my Discord server to let me know if you want to play, because we're about to get the new area, Sumeru, and I actually like the main overall story and the lore that they're building up in Genshin. If you haven't seen the trailer for the Fatui, holy shit, so much going on there. There is a Genshin manga, and I did read that, and so characters that were introduced in the manga that haven't made an appearance in the game are now about to make an appearance, and so we've got that lore going on. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. So, like, I am a writer. I love a good story. I love lore. I love all these things coming together, and we're starting to see some of that happening. We got Sumeru. I think the next one is Fontaine, right? So we get Sumeru is kind of like the India, and then I think Fontaine is kind of like France. Am I? Let me know if I'm getting that right. And then we've got the next one. I think is the Latin America one. It's the God of War or whatever. It's the Pyro Archon is after this one. So we get right now we're about to get Dendro, which is like plant and life and vitality, and then next we get Hydro, and then after that we're getting Pyro, and then we go to Shneznaya for Cryo, and then apparently we've got Conria coming up after that, and then it's like whatever the realm beyond Conria is. I like the story and the lore of Genshin. It's probably gonna take a while, but I'm always there. And I'm mentioning this because I saw Spider commenting, and I'm like, hell yeah, dude. That's always up, if not preoccupied. All right. That having been said, though, guys, let's go ahead, jump into this. We got a lot to read, and I'm basically just killing time to let the Marvel panels go. It's at SDCC, so that way when all the trailers drop, I can just sit down, watch them, and put it all together, and we'll just have like a big Comic-Con segment tomorrow. So hope you come by for that for Anime Church. I will be dressed up again, as it be. All right, so let's get started because we got some really good stuff to talk about, and honestly, we've got Eris stuff to talk about. Finally, in the main story, we've got Eris stuff. All right, Chapter 4, Nanahoshi's Hypothesis. Doubt the man god without opposing him. Those were the words my future self said. To be sure, a lot of what the man god said had struck me as dubious, especially the part about Orsted wanting to destroy the world, or the world falling apart if he died. I had no way of knowing where the truth ended and the lies began. Safe to say he hadn't been completely honest with me. Still, I couldn't let myself assume that the parts I wanted to be false were lies. If I jumped to the wrong conclusions, it might come back to bite me somewhere down the line. If nothing else, I had a feeling the man god's irritation had been real. It seemed like my future self's intervention had taken him completely by surprise. That said, it had also brought him dangerously close to classifying me as an enemy. At this point, I didn't have much of a choice but to do what he told me. Opposing the man god just wasn't an option here. He could launch all sorts of attacks at me from complete safety. Under those circumstances, there was no way I could protect everyone I cared about. Okay, so it's just a bunch of redeems. Okay. I just, out of the corner of my eye, I'm seeing this go by. In fact, why don't I just cover that up so that I'm not going to... All right, I'm not looking at comments while reading. I'll check them out in between chapters. I think that's better that way. Better to become his pawn, then. I couldn't stand the guy, and I didn't trust his promise in the slightest, but he was targeting us for a clear reason, and there was a chance he'd leave us alone once he was no longer in danger. The man god had ordered me to kill Orsted. Putting the specific details aside, I found his story about my descendants joining forces with the dragon god to kill him relatively plausible. His goal would be achieved as long as Orsted or I died. This was our one way out. Puppy. I had to protect my family. The man god was the one who wanted them dead, but I had no way of getting at him. He could just sit in his big white void, sending an endless stream of danger our way. Orsted, on the other hand, existed somewhere in this world. It was hard to imagine I could kill him, of course. In all honesty, I didn't even want to try, but from what the man god said, there was at least a chance it might work. One way or the other, I didn't want to see anyone die because I'd made the wrong choice here. The day after my encounter with the man god, I dropped by the Adventurers Guild with Sylphie and mailed my letter to Eris. There we go, sent it off. With that taken care of, the two of us headed straight to Perugius' floating fortress. We went our separate ways at the entrance, and I made my way to Nanahoshi's room. After being told to kill Orsted, I'd taken some time to think about who I might turn to for advice and assistance. She was the first person who'd popped into my head. That probably had something to do with my future self's words, consult Nanahoshi. But I also had the feeling she might know where to find the man. Of course, I'd need to discuss the situation with Sylphie and Roxy eventually, but I wanted to think carefully about how I'd explain it to them. I needed them to understand that none of this was their burden to bear. I wasn't sure how I was going to manage that, honestly. Hey there. Oh. Well, you're back earlier than I expected. It had been a few days since our last conversation, but Nanahoshi still hadn't recuperated fully. She was still bedridden for now, but there was a bit more color in her cheeks than before. Here you go, Nanahoshi, I said, placing a basket of assorted fruit on her table. Just a little get-well gift. Thanks, those look good. At this time of year, fresh fruit didn't come cheap at the local market, but I was about to ask for her help. It wouldn't hurt to mind my manners, no matter how businesslike our relationship might be. You look rather serious today, I must say. Did something happen? Nanahoshi was studying me with anxiety in her eyes. Was it that obvious? Well, probably. I was willing to bet my face was even paler than hers right now. I'll cut to the chase. I want to call in that favor you owe me. Okay, what do you need from me? Let me tell you what happened first, just so you know. It's a pretty crazy story, but I promise you it's the truth. All right. Slowly, carefully, I told her about the visit from my future self. I went through what he'd told me and summarized what I'd seen in the diary about the future. Then I moved on to my visit from the man god, his obvious irritation, and his claim that my descendants would join forces with Orsted to kill him. Finally, I told her that he'd ordered me to kill Orsted. I told her everything, in other words. I hadn't left anything out. When it was over, Nanahoshi sat silently for a moment, holding her fingers to her forehead. Sorry, I need a minute to process all of this. Time travel? Really? Yeah, he said he'd come from the future. Is there any hard evidence of that? There were comments in Japanese all over the diary. Also, he knew my name from my previous life. What was it, incidentally? I don't want to say. Suit yourself. In any case, are you sure this man was telling the truth? About what? His identity, for one thing. Even if he was a time traveler, maybe he was just impersonating you. His diary was identical to the one I'd just created. The first entry was exactly what I'd planned, what I'd been planning to write down for that day. That doesn't prove anything. He might have copied out the real diary while you were asleep. She wasn't wrong, but this wasn't going to get us anywhere. For what it's worth, I think he was exactly who he claimed to be. I see. Of course, it's possible that the man god chose someone you'd find believable for the role. So, what, you think the diary was all made up too, and he was just pretending to be upset in that dream? I wouldn't go that far. I'm just wondering if you really think the man god is trustworthy. Absolutely not. You're planning to follow his orders, though. What choice do I have, Nanahoshi? Nanahoshi sighed quietly, and then, With something like resignation in her eyes, she took the conversation down a slightly different track. To be honest, Rudius, I've heard a bit about the man god from Orsted himself. Really? Yes, it was just after he nearly killed you. Oh, right. I didn't get any details, but he said that he was going to kill the man god no matter what it took. He also mentioned that it wasn't possible right now. So Orsted really was after the man god, and he knew he wasn't capable of killing him just yet. Was he waiting for my descendants to be born, or maybe for the fifth and final dragon god to appear? Either way, the man god wanted to stop him before it was too late. It all seemed consistent enough. The more I thought about this, the more plausible the man god's words seemed. Could he really have come up with lies this convincing on the fly? Despite his irritation, it was possible he'd planned it all beforehand and simply faked his anger. But I just couldn't see myself figuring out which of his claims were false. Did it really matter what his goals were, though? Not right now. Not to me. In any case, Nanahoshi continued, why are you coming to me with this? Aren't there other people you should have turned to first? It's not like I could do anything to help you. My future self told me to consult you. I see. What did he have to say about me exactly? I found myself at a loss for words. Should I really answer this question? Tell her she might fail at the last moment and give in to despair? The diary hadn't contained any specifics, and my future self had been vague at best. Maybe it was better to be honest, though. If she knew there was a good chance of her research failing, she could brace herself for that outcome in advance and look for ways to avoid it. He said you're probably going to fail at the very last stage of your research. Nanahoshi's eyes widened in surprise. After a moment, she pressed her lips together tightly and shook her head. That's not what I was that's not what I was asking. I wanted to know if he explained why you should consult me. Well, I guess you died at some point, so he couldn't ask you. But he thought you might know where to find Orsted. He also said you spent a lot more time thinking through stuff, so you might be able to come up with another plan. Stuff? Like what? I don't know. The man god's real goals, probably? Then again, I'd sort of established that already. The thing about world peace was probably a load of crap, but I could believe that he was attempting to prevent his own death. Of course, there was a possibility that was just another intricate lie. Would you mind letting me have a look at this diary of yours? Sure. I handed over the battered old book. Nanahoshi flipped through the first few pages and grimaced. This is going to take a while to get through. Your handwriting's terrible, for one thing. Yeah, it took me 2 days to read the whole thing. All right. Can you loan it to me for 1 day, then? Think you can finish it that fast? I'm a quick reader. I'll get through it by this evening. I was tempted to just point her to the more important parts, but there was a chance she'd pick up on something crucial in the less relevant entries. It was probably better to be patient. Okay, then. I'm going to go get a little rest. I haven't been getting much sleep lately. All right. Come back later tonight or whenever you're ready. Thanks, Nanahoshi. I rose and left Nanahoshi's room. As soon as I stepped outside, I could feel a weight being lifted off my shoulders. I was experiencing some genuine relief. That seemed a little odd. Did I trust Nanahoshi that deeply? No, it wasn't that exactly. She was just the one person I could talk to about everything. Even things I couldn't tell Sylphie or Roxy. I didn't care about her so deeply that I felt the need to hide painful, ugly truths from her. Maybe that was what allowed me to turn to her for help and with problems like this. I was a pretty cold person sometimes, wasn't I? I glanced out the hallway window and noticed Ariel, Zenoba, Cliff, Sylphie, and Perugius discussing something or other out in the courtyard. Luke was standing a respectful distance behind them. Sylphie had positioned herself in front of Ariel and was talking directly to Perugius with her head held high. It was hard to believe she'd ever been that shy. It was hard to believe she'd ever been that shy, bullied little kid back in Buena Village. Still, according to my future self, Ariel was going to fail to gain Perugius' support before returning home to Asura, where she'd be defeated. Sylphie would accompany her, and all of them would die. I probably needed to lend them a hand. I'd accepted that possibility back when I married Sylvie. First things first, though. My top priority at the moment was dealing with the man god. I turned from the window and headed back to the room I'd been given, hoping to get a few hours of sleep. When I woke up, Sophie was lying by my side. Her face was always adorable when she was asleep, and it was only inches away from mine. It got my blood pumping right away. I didn't remember going to bed with her. She must have slipped in at some point after. I was already asleep. Oh, I don't know why I paused there. She must have slipped in some point after I was already asleep. Maybe she'd tried to wake me up. Maybe she'd wanted to ask for my advice about dealing with Perugius. I felt a little guilty I hadn't been available. I gently lifted her arm off my waist, patted her on the head, and then got out of bed. Rudy, give me a kiss. This girl said some cute things in her sleep sometimes. Normally, it would have put me in the mood for a little evening tumble, but I was too preoccupied with less enjoyable thoughts at the moment. I fixed my bed head with my hands and left the room as quietly as I could. The windows in the hallway revealed a sky full of stars. I'd slept into the night. As I walked along the hall, I idly wondered if the presence of those stars meant this universe looked something like my old one in the cosmic scale, or on the cosmic scale. Might I ask where you're going this hour? Gah! A masked man surprised me as I turned a corner. Hello there, Aramanfi. It's quite late, as I'm sure you know. Let me repeat myself. Where are you headed to at this hour? I was going to see Nanahoshi. Is she still awake? I imagine so. She requested a pen and paper not long ago. Ah, good, thanks. I continued on my way, my heart beating a little faster than usual. Did spirits never sleep or what? They weren't human, so maybe they didn't need to. Must be nice having your security guards active 24 hours a day. That reminds me, they listen in on every conversation that happens in this castle, right? That presumably meant that Perugius already knew about everything I'd discussed with Nanahoshi this afternoon. Since he hadn't dropped by to discuss it with me, I had to assume he was deliberately staying out of this for now. But he wasn't the only one monitoring me either. The man god had been watching as well. Feeling increasingly unnerved, I made my way through the quiet halls to Nanahoshi's room. Light was filtering from the edges of her door. She was still awake then. Just to be polite, I knocked before entering. Who's there? It's Rudius. You're coming by this late? Your wife might get the wrong idea, you know. Want me to come back tomorrow instead? No, I don't mind. Come on in. I opened the door and stepped inside. Nanahoshi was still lying in bed, but there were sheets of paper scattered all around. Wow. Bit of a mess here. Well, I'm in the middle of trying to piece some things together. Did you figure anything out? I asked, picking up a random piece of paper as I sat down in the chair at her bedside. I'm not positive, but based on this diary and what you told me earlier, I've managed to come up with a hypothesis. Oh? What kind of hypothesis? For many years now, I've been asking myself why I was brought here. To this universe, this place, and this specific time. Did that have anything to do with the topic at hand? I didn't see the connection, but it couldn't hurt to hear her out. At first, I assumed it wasn't just me. I thought my friend must have been brought here as well. Should I be asking why she assumed that? I already had an idea, though. It involved my very last memories from my previous life. In my attempt to save 3 high schoolers who were about to be run over by a truck, I pulled one of them to safety, losing my life in the process. Nanahoshi and her friend hadn't been hit, but she was still transported to this world. I could understand why she thought her friend might be here as well. They were standing very close to each other in that moment, but no matter how thoroughly I searched this world, I couldn't find him anywhere. Oh, that was her thought. I'm dumb. Sorry, I got a buildup of gunk in my nose that I'm trying to clear out. I've been having sinus issues for the last 3 days, and these gnats buzzing around aren't helping. But no matter how thoroughly I searched this world, I couldn't find him anywhere. Isn't it possible he died immediately upon arrival? I did consider that, but why would he have died when I survived? Was that why she tagged along with Orsted's travels? Was she hoping to find her friend? There was probably more to it than that. Yeah, I guess you're right. Nothing happened to me either. Are you certain about that? Now she'd lost me. I didn't remember being in any danger as a kid. In Buena Village, I had Paul and Zenith taking care of me, and things were generally peaceful. Listen, when you told me that your future self had arrived in the past without all his internal organs, it occurred to me that I might have come here from the future as well. Wait, what? So you think this is the same universe we were in before, and this is just the distant past? No, I'm not saying anything like that. I'm sorry. I'm not sure how to explain this. You remember that the cause of the displacement incident has yet to be established, yes? Didn't that happen as a side effect of your arrival here? Right. But theoretically speaking, merely teleporting someone into a field shouldn't have caused a disaster like that. True enough. But she'd been brought here from a different world. That probably had something to do with it, right? I don't know, Nanahoshi. When my future self traveled back here, it didn't have any side effects like that. Yes, it did. What? Seriously? Half of the man's internal organs were missing, if you'd recall. Yeah, but wait a second. Was she saying that his organs had disappeared for the same reason all those people did during the teleportation incident? Or during the displacement incident? Traveling 50 years back in time exhausted your future self's supply of mana. Well, not completely. He was still able to use a few spells. But he grew weaker every time he did so, right? He was an incredibly powerful mage, but he didn't even bother trying to heal his wounds. Nanahoshi tapped at the cover of the battered diary to emphasize her point. Now let's suppose that I was brought here from 100 years in the future. Presumably, that would require at least 2 times more mana than you possess. For some reason, she sounded very convinced of this. I had a feeling she might know a bit more than she was telling me. Traveling back 50 years in time cost you part of your body. Where did those organs go, exactly? Were they just left behind in the future? Well, let's consider jumping back 100 years. Surely you wouldn't get off with losing a few organs in that case. Would your entire body get left behind instead? That doesn't seem right, does it? I'd imagine you would end up somewhere else. The same place those organs disappeared to, that is. And where's that supposed to be? I have no idea, I'm afraid. But I think this is all part of a balancing process of sorts. After all, the mana of this world obeys the law of conservation of energy. Does it? Huh, that's news to me. Rudius! Stop being stupid! It's been beyond obvious that mana obeys the laws of conservation of energy. Sometimes Rudius isn't thundering dumbass. Alright. I don't have the evidence to back this up, but I imagine many people disappeared in the displacement incident. Thousands or perhaps tens of thousands. Now, tell me something. In the immediate aftermath of that incident, did you notice anything wrong with you? Perhaps you were very low on mana for no apparent reason? In the aftermath of that incident, Eris and I had met Regerd, and we'd ended up in the city of Rikarisu, working as adventurers. I didn't remember anything strange happening. No, wait. Hadn't I felt strangely sluggish in those first few days? As we made our way to Rikarisu? I'd gotten worn out really easily, too. That was similar to the way it feels when you're running out of mana. 1 second, Nanahoshi. If you're right about this, why did some people disappear but not others? Based on what the man god told you, I'd speculate it had something to do with the strength of their destinies, or what have you. The laws of causality might have protected some people more strongly than others. What? Now you're just speculating? This entire theory is completely speculative. I did say it was just a hypothesis, remember? My destiny was strong, and that went for the women in my life as well. That was why Sylphie and Eris had come out of the incident safe and sound. Maybe it ran in the family, too. That would explain why my parents and sisters had survived. Or maybe I was just slapping a convenient reason on a bunch of random events. Okay, so what's the bottom line here? That you came here from the future? That's not the point. It's more that... How am I supposed to explain this? Nanahoshi was practically tearing her hair out in frustration at this point. She seemed to be having a really hard time putting her ideas into words. I'm guessing that at some point in the future, something established a chain of causality leading to the man god's downfall. A chain of causality? Right. In order to prevent that future from being realized, the man god began to meddle with your life. Think back for a moment, please. When was it that you first encountered him? The first dream had occurred right after the displacement incident, but at the time, the man god said that he'd been keeping his eye on me for a while beforehand. Hold on. Yesterday, he claimed he only discovered me during that disaster. It was hard to pick the truth out of all his lies. Did you remember seeing anything odd in the period before the displacement incident? Before the incident? Actually, maybe so. I'd seen that strange gem floating in the sky outside Soros' sex tower back in Fatoa. Looks like something came to mind. Do you know when this oddity first came into existence? How was I supposed to know that? No, wait. Did Soros say something about this at the time? Come on, you could do this. You've got a good memory in this body, right? He said, I found it 3 years ago. Yeah, that sounds right. I guess it was back when I was 5 years old or so. Did anything happen to you at that age? Did you meet anyone important? Well, I guess that was when I got to know Sylphie, but that's the only thing that comes to mind. Suddenly, a few pieces of the puzzle snapped together. At the age of 5, I met Sylphie and we grew close. As a direct result of that, Paul sent me off to Fatoa, where I met Eris. On my 10th birthday, Eris and I were very nearly intimate, and the next day, the displacement incident had occurred. Immediately after that, the man god got in touch with me. Was that the exact point when a future, where he died came to be? Originally, you weren't meant to exist in this world, correct? Sure. Why do you think you were reincarnated in it, then? How am I supposed to know? I think it happened for a reason, personally. What reason? Someone sent us here, Rudius. Both of us. They sent us to this era as a means to change the future. Who is this someone supposed to be? Someone from the future who wanted very much to see the man god die. This was starting to make my head hurt. Was she implying we were all puppets dancing on the strings of someone who wasn't even born yet? I can't make any sense of this, Nanahoshi. What are you getting at here? I think that you and I are necessary parts of a world in which the man god one day dies. Well, that cleared up exactly nothing. It's possible that these descendants of yours summoned me here in order to create some tool or weapon they needed to destroy the man god, and until I play my part by doing so, I can't return to my old world. Anything I try will fail. How does that make any sense? I was brought here because I have to make that tool someday. Essentially, I'm a walking time paradox. Alright, let's see if I can sort out what she's saying here. The man god was going to die at the hands of Orsted and my descendants, who would join forces in the future. For that to happen, I needed to have children. From the moment I met Sylphie as a child, the two of us were destined to get married and have a baby. The same probably went for Roxy, judging from the man god's focus on her. Maybe it even applied to Eris, since the displacement incident had occurred right after we'd nearly done some naughty things. In the future, where my family was wiped out, the man god was victorious. But it wasn't enough for my descendants to join up with Orsted, either. They probably needed something else. Something Nanahoshi would one day create. And that was why she'd been summoned here, 10 years after I had. In other words, we hadn't just been summoned, but sent back in time as well. Maybe someone had done this intentionally. Maybe it was some strange byproduct of the principles of causality. We had no way of knowing from our end, but if Nanahoshi's hypothesis was correct, we'd reached this world as a result of actions taken by someone in the future. Did that mean those events had happened before we came here? Had the future come before the past? Did the chicken come before the egg? Well, whatever. All right, I think I understand your hypothesis. That's good to hear. Sorry, I'm so clumsy at explaining these things. It was an interesting theory, to be sure, but it wasn't a very reassuring one. Basically, it means the man god was probably telling the truth. My descendants really will team up with Orsted to kill him someday. Yes, I suppose so. Okay, then, let's get back to the main topic. What main topic? How I go about killing Orsted. Oh. Nanahoshi frowned and fell silent. Even if your theory is accurate, the man god is trying to avoid that future, and he succeeded at least once. There might be a destiny at work here, but the future can still change. I just don't think it's a good idea, Rudius. You'd be better off talking to Orsted and trying to find some... Stop, Nanahoshi. The man god might be listening in on this conversation right now, for all I know. Biting her lip, Nanahoshi glanced at the ceiling. Sorry, wrong direction. The barren world's below us. I don't know why I decided to go with that for the line, but let me redo that. It felt weird. Sorry, wrong direction. The barren world's below us. This destiny thing is so abstract. It's such an Okay, I got that sentence all jumbled up in my head. This destiny thing is an abstract concept. I can't see it, and I can't count on it. My destiny might be strong, but that didn't protect my father or my mother. I'm not saying... Oh, my destiny might be strong, but that didn't protect my father or my mother. I'm not saying the man god will do anything to me right away, but he can see the future. If he realizes I'm going to betray him, I might come back home to find Aisha dead, or he could set up some tragedy to happen a few years down the line. But the man god can't manipulate everyone, right? I'm not so sure about that. Who knows exactly what he's capable of? I wouldn't be surprised if he's been playing down his powers. I suppose you're right. And anyway, it's not like Orsted has a chance to beat him right now. Assuming the man god isn't lying, he needs my descendants to help him out, or else he's going to fail. Yes, that's true, assuming the man god isn't lying. I have to protect my family. The man god's the one who's trying to kill them, but I have no way to fight him. At least Orsted's somewhere on this planet. I don't know where, but there's at least a chance to find him. There's no guarantee the man god will keep his word, you know. Orsted is the dragon god. Based on my diary, he's probably the only one who knows about the secret art to reach the barren world. If I kill him, that knowledge will be lost. The man god won't have any reason to come after my family. You know, even if Orsted dies, there's a chance your descendants will find a way there on their own. So what the hell am I supposed to do then? Oh, sorry. So what the hell am I supposed to do then? My words came out more loudly than I had expected. I hadn't meant to yell at her. Nanahoshi flinched, but pressed on with her argument regardless. Talk to Orsted, like I said. He might be able to help you out of this. You think I didn't consider this already? Look, if I joined forces with Orsted, I'd be making a permanent enemy of the man god. You know what happens if I try to fight him on my own? Well, look at that diary. I don't stand a chance. This time, I'd have Orsted on my side, but what does that change? He can't win either. The only reason I had a chance is because of me showing up and throwing things out of whack, right? It's the whole reason the man god is coming after me. Orsted's fighting a losing battle right now. You think he's going to have the time and energy to help protect my entire family? Is he that powerful? You want me to make an enemy of the man god before I even know? But Orsted is more trustworthy than the man god. How can I know that for sure? Sounds like he might be trying to destroy the world. I mean, I'm not saying I believe that completely, but look, the man god was deceiving me. He pretended to be helping me out for years and years. What if Orsted did the same to you? Well, I can't deny it's possible, at least. I paused to study Nanahoshi's face. There was a hint of fear in her eyes. I don't trust the man god, I said quietly. But I can't trust Orsted either. I knew how powerless I really was. I could believe what my future self had told me, that I didn't stand a chance against the man god. I could imagine, in vivid detail, following in the old man's footsteps. I could see myself losing everything I cared about and dying a miserable death. It was hard for me to be optimistic about fighting Orsted either. The only outcome I could picture was an ugly, brutal defeat. But the man god did say my destiny was strong. Maybe he'd seen a future in which I could win this fight somehow. That was my last ray of hope. Listen, Nanahoshi. My future self told me to consult you. I'm guessing that means you know some way of getting in touch with Orsted. Well, yes. Help me out, please. I need to kill him. But I... He's done a lot for me. Nanahoshi's eyes darted away from mine. She was clearly flustered. Orsted was the first person she met after her arrival in this world. He probably saved her life many times over, just like Reger had saved me when I was stranded in the demon continent. It would be hard to betray someone you owed that much. I probably couldn't have done it either. I wouldn't betray Reger, even if it cost me my life. I understood what she was feeling, and normally I might have given up for the sake of maintaining a good relationship with her, if nothing else. But I wasn't going to back down this time. It just wasn't an option. Listen to me for a minute, Nanahoshi Shizuka. Before I came to this world, I was a complete waste of oxygen. I don't know what you think of me as I am today, but in my previous life, I was someone you would have despised, and for good reason. But you know what? I was reincarnated here, and I made a fresh start. I screwed up plenty of times, and it cost me dearly sometimes, but I learned from those experiences. And now I have a family that means the world to me. I just want to keep them safe. I got out of my seat. Sitting in my chair was no way to plead to someone. There was a proper way to do this sort of thing. I went down on my hands and knees. I pressed my forehead to the ground and made myself as small as possible. Please. I'm begging for you. I'm begging you. Help me. The floating fortress's floors were cold and hard. For all I know, the man-god could have a change of heart tomorrow. I don't want to waste any time. I don't want to come home one day and find my family lying dead on the ground. What are you doing? Stop it! I don't want to lose any of them. Please. Nanahoshi got out of bed. She grabbed my shoulder and forcibly pulled my head off the ground. Okay, I'll help you. Just stop doing that. There was an exhaustion and sadness on her face. I felt a small stab of guilt. At the same time, though, a part of me was dancing with joy. Sometimes I kind of hate myself. Thank you. Really. Maybe I was making a huge mistake here. But honestly, what choice did I have? Yeah, he absolutely was making a huge mistake. Alrighty. Time to see what you guys thought of that chapter. That's how loops work, Rudy. Oldie has told you to listen to Nanahoshi. Rudy, literally not learning. Damn brickhead. What'd you guys think about, like, that overwhelmingly excessive amount of information? Doesn't give a shit about the new world and is smart. Yep. After reading the diary from what alternate Rudy did to Sylphie. Yeah, that's true. Dragon King. All right. So, yeah, that's a lot of information to get dumped on you. I know that when I originally read this chapter, I had to go back and just kind of like stop. As much as I wanted to read the next chapter and go through this and kind of get to the next thing, because it's really getting exciting. It's really getting exciting as for where things are going and wanting to know how things are going to play out and everything. This is a lot of shit to digest, so I kind of needed a moment to process everything. And honestly, I appreciate the reread of this, because I had misinterpreted things initially, because I don't think I gave myself enough time to process or go back and check some things out. I thought that they were saying that this world was Earth in the distant past. No, this is still a separate world, but we're also dealing with time travel. So it's a different world, and there's a lot of time travel. So it's both things. It's not... Okay, so I had misinterpreted what was going on here, and it's really easy. I'm not as intelligent as I think I am, clearly. But yeah, this is a crazy amount of theory and hypothesis to just dump on people. Yeah, this world is a cube in a way. But I don't think it's a literal cube. I don't think the world is actually cube shaped. I think it's kind of like it's a realm. Like I don't think it's like a literal cube. I'm not taking that literally. I think it's like a cubic realm because there were different worlds, and then they traveled between the different worlds, and then eventually the aftermath of that was all these worlds collided and formed this world. So yeah, that's I want to say that there's probably reality or realm jumping happening here versus it literally being a cube. It's a cube with a sort of barrier between the faces. No, all right. No, saying this is where you and I are going to disagree. I don't think it's actually a literal thing. He was brought to the past from another world to make probably his descendant who did it. Okay. I honestly don't think it's like a literal cube. Just if magic has to obey the laws of physics, then physics has to obey the laws of physics. So, I mean, there are some divine things at work, but also the planet. I'm gonna disagree with you here. The planet is not a cube. I'm gonna sit here and say that outright. I do not believe that the actual planet is a cube. That's not how day-night cycles work. And based on what we've seen so far from the show, there is a curvature to the horizon in this world that is very similar to ours. It's not a cube. It's spherical. I think we're dealing with reality or realm or alternate dimensions, stuff like that, to the gods living in a higher realm and seeing things from a different perspective. The quote unquote world could be cubical, but to us, I think it would still be spherical. Going from a 2 dimension to maybe like a 5 or 6 dimension thing. Oh, okay. Mom just said thank you. Okay. Sorry, got a text from my mom or an email from my mom, and I had to check it real quick. I know why they were brought into that world from the web novel. I'm giving spoilers, but you'll be shocked. Oh, okay. You're giving spoilers. Oh, you're not giving spoilers. Okay. At the reason they were brought over. Okay, cool. I guess we'll find that out like way, way in the future. What the hell is wrong with your keyboard tonight? All right. This is interesting shit. Like I like the theorizing. Once you've seen a few time travel stories, it's not too hard to make a guess. Pass from another one. Okay, so forgot the knot. Here's the thing. I just finished volume 18. I'm guessing the reason is like way toward the end, and I'm hoping that the people were saying that they were disappointed with the ending of the web novel. It's further than the light novel is translated. Yeah, I gotcha. People are saying that they were disappointed in the ending of the web novel, how it ended, kind of upset them. Apparently, from what I understand, Maganote is doing a lot of touching up and cleaning up of like the storylines in the light novel. So I'm imagining that the ending of the light novel will at least be better than the ending of the web novel because he's had more time to sit with how things ended and kind of fine tune it or whatnot. So I imagine I'm still going to be let down by the ending, but hopefully it won't be as crushing to me as it was for the web novel readers. All right, that having been said, I like this theorizing. I really enjoyed the the ideas and theories that are being brought up in this discussion, but it's time to move on and talk to Eris. There's several gnats flying around here, so if you see me swatting, that's what's going on. You don't think you can improve on the ending? It was great. Oh, okay, cool. I've heard so many people say they didn't like the ending. So, but I mean, that's also the limits of your imagination. I'm not saying he's going to redo his ending or anything. I'm just saying that, there are things that he can add or uh, change slightly or take away that would make the ending feel better. Ending of the side story is controversial, not the ending. Okay. Uh, alrighty. All right. That having been said, we're gonna move on. Chapter 5: A Letter from Afar. The Sword Sanctum in the far west of the Northern Territories was a place where the air rang with fervent battle cries and the sound of wooden swords. Most of the people you passed. Okay, hang on. I need to enlarge this. There we go. That way I'm not seeing the. That way I don't see the chat or anything going down there, so I can just look at it or not see it and not get distracted. All right. The Sword Sanctum, in the far west of the Northern Territories, was a place where the air rang with fervent battle cries and the sound of wooden swords. Most of the people you passed on the street wore martial arts uniforms or something similar and carried practice swords and hand towels. Sometimes you might see a visitor in the dress of a swordsman, but those who chose to stay for an extended period usually adopted clothes designed specifically for training. At the very back of this little town was a vast, snowy field that led to a great training hall. Today, a woman in swordsman's clothes stood in that field, near the entrance to the hall, or of that hall. Her light shirt and black pants were clearly chosen with mobility in mind. Over those, she wore the traditional overcoat granted to sword saints of the sword god style. There were two swords at her waist, even at a distance. The longer of the two was distinguishable as the work of a true master. From the quality of her weapon alone, it was clear she was a highly ranked student of the sword god style. One of the few who had reached the rank of sword king, in fact. Her intimidating appearance, combined with her long, brilliant red hair, was reminiscent of a lion. 9 out of the 10 people who saw her in the street would have immediately stepped out of her way on instinct. She was the Berserker Sword King, and her name was Eris Greyrat. At the moment, however, she was looking down at her imposing outfit with a slightly anxious look. "Hey, Nina, are you sure I look all right?" Yes, you're fine. You look very impressive, I promise." Standing in front of this red-maned lion was a young woman in a martial arts uniform who wore her dark blue hair tied back neatly. Her name was Nina Fallion, and from the tone of her voice, she was starting to get a little exasperated with her rival. "Really, Eris, the outfit's perfect. You're the very picture of a sword king. But Rudius used to say he liked my frilly clothes better." "Oh, for crying out loud!" Nina let out a long, suffering sigh, then continued the conversation as best she could. "Eris, how exactly do you expect me to know what your boyfriend wants to see you wearing?" "Oh, yeah, I guess you wouldn't. Would you please stop looking at me with pity in your eyes? Gino and I... never mind that." With a firm shake of her hand, Nina jabbed a finger in the air. "Look, it's not like you're going to find dressy clothes like that around here anyway. You do remember where we are, right? If you really want some frilly outfit, you'll just have to buy one in the city." "Yeah, true enough," said Eris with a little nod. From all appearances, the matter was now settled, but this was the 5th time today they basically had this exact conversation. "Anyway, I don't know why you're obsessing about your outfit right now. No matter how fast you go, it'll be a good month on the road before you reach Sharia." "I'd worry less about the clothes and more about making sure you're clean and presentable when you see him. Make sure you take a bath, comb your hair, and put on a little perfume. You do know men don't like stinky women, yes? Rudius does. He never seemed to mind when I got all sweaty. Well, I suppose he'd have to be understanding if he found you attractive. Actually, I've even caught him sniffing my sweaty old underwear a couple of times. He might be enjoying it." "What? The man's a pervert!" Eris scowled slightly at this remark. "Rudius isn't a pervert. He's just a little naughty. He was getting off on your body odor, Eris. That's the definition of a pervert." Eris brought her nose to her armpit and took a few experimental sniffs. Her clothes were new, and she'd taken a bath in preparation for her journey. All she could smell was the faint scent of soap. He's not a pervert. Well, if you say so, sorry. I suppose I went a bit too far. The two of them fell silent for a while. Now and then their hair stirred as a cold wind blew across the quiet, snowy field. Ghislaine's sure taking her time, muttered Eris. I suppose the students might be squabbling about who gets to come along. Eris nodded vaguely. Yeah, maybe. You know, Eris, I have heard a few rumors about your boyfriend now and then. What kind of rumors? They say that they say Rudius Greyrat can make his own eyes pop out. I wouldn't be surprised. Also, he supposedly likes girls with flat chests. Nina glanced at Eris as she spoke those words. Eris looked down at herself as well. It was rare to hear the word voluptuous applied to a swordswoman, but in her case the glove fit. That won't be a problem. Her voice sounded confident enough, but Eris' face looked a little paler than before. Let's see, what else? They say he conquered a legendary labyrinth, destroyed an immortal demon king, and put up a good fight against one of the 7 great powers. No kidding. Well, that's Rudius for you, and I'd expect no less. Just like that, the color was back in her cheeks. She even looked a little flushed. It made her happy to know that Rudius had been working hard to grow stronger, just like she had. The man is monstrously strong, I'll give him that. Normally, I wouldn't have believed a word of all this. Eris puffed up with pride and let out a little snort of pleasure. I know! He's amazing! However, there are also some less pleasant rumors out there. Like what? Like he's a notorious playboy who struts around with a different woman every other day. At these words, Eris' smile suddenly stiffened. Oh, and it sounds like he abuses his strength to get anything he wants. Look, Eris, this is just a possibility. Nina paused, then continued in a very quiet voice. But maybe he's forgotten all about you. As soon as those words left her lips, Nina's left hand shot up to block her face, and a split second later, Eris's fist slammed into her palm. While she'd managed to stop the punch, the fury of Eris's gaze was too much for Nina to withstand. She averted her eyes awkwardly. It's just a rumor. Eris pulled her fist back and folded her arms. She widened her stance and threw out her chest, twisted her mouth into a frown, and sulkily turned her head. Oh, look, Ghislaine's finally here. 4 horses were approaching slowly from the direction Eris had glanced in. A beast folk woman was leading them. This was the Sword King, Ghislaine de Doldia. While she had to be nearly 40 years of age by now, her body was lean and muscular as ever. Ghislaine led 2 of the horses by the reins. Just a little behind was a young and beautiful woman who led the other 2. While she wore plain traveler's clothing, her long, silky hair and shapely face were more than enough to entrance all who saw her. This was the Water King, Isolde Cluel. The water god herself, Rada Leah, was perched atop one of the horses she was leading. Sorry for the wait. Ghislaine handed Eris the reins to a horse laden with luggage. Were you 2 fighting again? It was Nina's fault, Eris replied, pouting sullenly. Nina just shrugged her shoulders. I see, Ghislaine murmured, an amused smile flashing across her face. Not much of a send-off, came a voice from above. Gall didn't even bother getting out of bed? The old woman on the horse, easily the most formidable person in this imposing group, was looking backwards at the hall with a grumpy expression. I wouldn't read anything into that, Master Rida. The sword god is something of a lightweight, I'm afraid. What, you think he's got a hangover from last night? Good grief. The man should know his limits at his age. You know, Nina, this might be a golden opportunity. Why don't you challenge him to a duel? Nina smiled awkwardly at the old woman's teasing. I think I'll have to refrain. I intend to become the sword god in a somewhat more sportsmanlike fashion. Oh, you're such an earnest little thing. Don't worry, dear. You'll surpass that old sourpuss in no time. Just keep doing what you're doing. But for what it's worth, you might want to keep an eye on the folks below you on the ladder instead. The ladder? Well, in any case, I'll do my utmost to make good use of everything you've taught me. Nina bowed her head respectfully to Rada, then turned to face Isolde. I'd ask where you 2 are off to next. You'll be traveling with Eris part way, correct? That's right. That's right, Isolde replied. We're returning to the kingdom of Osra. I've been invited to serve as an instructor of swordsmanship at the royal palace. Ah, I see. It's going to get a bit lonely around here without you. Isolde smiled gently at Nina's words. Do make sure to pay me a visit if you happen to stop by the kingdom. I'll show you around the capital. No thanks, Nina said, scratching her nose bashfully. If a country girl like me stumbled into Osra, I'm sure all your fancy city folk would just point and laugh. Eris snorted disdainfully. If anyone laughs at us, we could just cut him in half. Alarming as these words were, they did remind Nina exactly who the three of them were, and she chuckled softly. Laughing at a sword saint, let alone a sword king or a water king, generally wasn't the best of ideas. You'd either have to be a truly formidable combatant in your own right, or a complete and utter fool. All right, then. Eris, shall we be on our way? Yeah, let's go. Isolde smiled at Eris's energetic reply and hopped onto her horse. Eris followed suit, mounting hers so roughly that it shook itself in displeasure. She slapped it on the neck, and it quickly settled down again. Be well, everyone, called Nina, surprised to find that there were tears in her eyes. Her thoughts were drifting through the years since Eris's arrival here. Their first meeting had been a truly horrible one. Nina had been humiliated, and Eris subjected her to many more embarrassments in quick succession. But the frustration of those failures had driven Nina to improve, and when Isolde arrived, her gentle words and tactful advice had been of great help as well. If it weren't for them, Nina would no doubt have still been stagnating in the middle of the pack of sword emperors. She might never have risen into the realm of the Sword Kings. In other words, she owed them. Hey, you folks, got a delivery for you. Mind signing for me? Nina's melodramatic musings were abruptly interrupted by a cheerful, carefree voice. Trying to contain her irritation, she turned in its direction. A somewhat dopey-looking man in thick winter coat was standing in the snow nearby, puffing white clouds of vapor with every breath. It appeared that he'd absolutely no idea who any of them were. Rather than waiting for them to respond, he reached into his bag and retrieved an envelope. Oh, good grief, who is it from? Well, looks like it's addressed to a Miss Eris Boreas Greyrat. Eris frowned suspiciously at this, but at the man's next words, her eyes shot wide open. It's from a Mr. Rudius Greyrat? Rudius? Eris instantly leapt from her horse and snatched the envelope from the man's hands. Just as she was about to rip it open, however, he hurriedly grabbed her by the shoulder. Hey, wait a second there. I need you to sign or they won't pay me for the delivery. Fine, where do I sign? Ah, right. Hold on just a moment, please. The man reached into his bag, pulled out a pen in some sort of form, which he handed to Eris. She paused for a few seconds, clearly attempting to remember the letters of her name, then scribbled it in a barely comprehensible scrawl. The man studied these characters for a long moment and eventually managed to identify the letters Eris. Okay then, thank you kindly. Boy, I wish every job paid this well. He tucked the receipt back in his bag and headed back up the path in high spirits. Eris barely spared a glance in his direction as she got to work on the envelope. She was about to tear the thing open with her hands, but then she saw the words Miss Eris Boreas Greyrat on the front of it in what was clearly Rudius's handwriting. He must be in a real hurry. I haven't used the name Boreas in years. Oh, wait. Maybe he doesn't know that? She flipped the envelope around and studied the name written on its back. Rudius Greyrat. His handwriting hadn't changed at all. The letters were carefully shaped, but always looked a little off somehow. A long time ago, she'd spent hours every day staring at this handwriting as Rudius tried to teach her how to read. The memory made her smile. In order to preserve the envelope as best she could, Eris decided to open it at the top with her fingernails. Her first attempt had no effect. Neither did her second. After the third try, she reached for one of the swords at her waist. Tossing the letter in the air, she drew the blade. Ha! Somehow, instead of slicing the envelope in half, her sword cut a tiny sliver from its very top. Eris caught both pieces as they fell back down, tossed aside the smaller one, and finally pulled the letter out. With an eager look on her face, she began to read it, and then she continued to read it. As she did so, her excited expression quickly gave way to one of profound irritation. Uh, Eris? Nina asked gingerly. What does it say? Eris didn't reply. She was still glaring fiercely down at the piece of paper in her hands. Eris? Are you listening? Oh, shut up! I don't recognize some of the words, all right? It's just taking me a little while to read. Ah, I see. You do it, Nina. What? I can't read myself, you know. Seriously? That's gonna come back to bite you someday. Why are you lecturing me about this? You can't read either. As the two of them began to squabble, Isolde hopped down from her horse with a sigh. Calm down, you two. I'll read it instead. Oh, okay, said Eris, handing the letter over. Thanks. Isolde began to read slowly and carefully. At first, her expression was neutral, but as time passed, it began to grow stormier and stormier, and once she was finished, she cried out in a voice full of anger, What is the matter with this man? Huh? Said Eris nervously. What? What does it say? Oh, Eris, you were training so hard all these years for him? You poor thing. St. Millis, take pity on this girl. Isolde folded her hands and looked beseechingly to the heavens for a moment. Then looked over at Eris with eyes full of sympathy. Eris, you really ought to forget all about this man. Why don't you come along with me to Osira instead? It would be such a waste to give yourself to a scoundrel like this. Look, will you just tell me what the letter says? Hissed Eris, reaching the swords at her waist. Do you want me to chop you in half? Very well, then, here it is. Clearing her throat, Isolde began to read the letter in a voice that rang with righteous outrage. Dear Miss Eris, it's been quite some time, hasn't it? This is Rudius Greyharat. Somehow it seems 5 years have passed since we went our separate ways. Do you still remember me? I certainly hope so. I know I haven't forgotten you or the time we spent in each other's company. During our first night together, I swore to myself that I would stay with you forever. I fully intended to stay at your side for the rest of my days, supporting you through anything life sent your way. But when I woke up in the morning, I found myself alone in bed. You were already gone. Devastated by your disappearance, I sank into depression. The next 3 years of my life were bitter, lonely ones. Nothing I did felt meaningful. I felt as if I was wandering through a heavy fog. Of course, I don't blame you for any of this, but I hope you can at least understand how miserable I was at the time. And for the reason I'm writing this letter, well, let's just say a certain someone recently mentioned you to me. Up until now, I was convinced you'd abandoned me to travel the world on your own. But this individual claimed I'd misunderstood your feelings completely, that you'd never stop caring for me or thinking of me. I have 2 wives now. Both of them pulled me out of my despair in moments when it might have crushed me. While I may have misinterpreted your reactions, that didn't make my pain any less real, and they were there for me when I needed them most. However, if it's true that your heart remains unchanged, if you truly want to be reunited with me again and spend your life with me, I'm prepared to accept your feelings. I've no intention of leaving my 2 existing wives, so you have become my 3rd. I understand you might find this proposal unacceptable, or perhaps infuriating. If so, you have every right to punch me to your heart's content. I'd appreciate it if you'd let me off with 2 or 3 good swings, though. Of course, my hope is that it won't come to that. Even if you're not willing to join my family, I hope we can at least become good friends. Sincerely, Rudius Greyrat. Eris wasn't saying anything. She wasn't moving either. For all appearances, she'd been turned to stone. Isolde took one look at her and promptly resumed her earlier tirade. Well, there you have it. Isn't he awful? Having 2 wives is bad enough, and now he's casually offering to make you number 3? The man clearly has no respect for women whatsoever. I don't know, said Nina, peering at the letter with a thoughtful frown. Sounded like he was trying pretty hard to be considerate. Considerate? It's the first letter he wrote her in years, and he didn't even bother saying, I love you? He seems to think he'd been doing her a favor by marrying her. No, I'm sorry, I don't like this Rudius Greyrat one bit. Look, he thought Eris had dumped him, right? And he'd spent 3 whole years moping about it, too. Isn't it partially her fault for wandering off like that? Oh, please, he probably made all that up to make her feel guilty. He just wants her because she's a master swordsman with a nice body. Uh, I don't know about that. Would you really risk keeping Eris around just to have a sexy bodyguard? Nina was pondering the matter seriously. Isolde was squawking mad, and Eris was staring up at the sky, her arms still folded, her eyes no longer seeing anything at all. The sky above was blue, but her mind was a pure white void. Hmm. Hmm? Oh, there's one more piece of paper in here. It was at this point that Isolde realized she hadn't read the entire letter yet. Retrieving the final sheet of paper, she began to read. Let's see. P.S. As I write these words, I'm preparing to fight the dragon god Orsted to the death. I have no idea if I can win. It's possible I won't even be alive by the time this letter reaches you. But if I do make it back alive, let's talk things out. By the time she finished reading out these words, Isolde's face had visibly stiffened. That went for Nina as well. Her expression was one of fear and awe. The mere idea of challenging the dragon god himself to a duel had turned her spine to ice. But Eris's face, and hers alone. But on Eris's face, and hers alone, there was a grin. Her eyes were alive again, burning with passion and determination. All right, she cried, leaping back up on her horse. We've got to hurry if we're going to make it there in time. Let's move, Ghislaine. Just like that, she kicked the steed into motion. It sprinted forward across the plain, kicking up snow as it went. Ghislaine hurried her own horse after it. They barreled past the courier who delivered the letter, sending him flying to one side and disappearing into the distance in a matter of seconds. Nina and Isolde just stood there staring after them, too stunned to even blink. That's Eris for you. All right, there we are. 100% that's Eris. I don't know why I keep looking at this screen. I'm just like, the chat's right there. Clearly, if I'm talking to the chat, I look at the chat. No, you guys are the camera. I need to look at the damn camera. All this time, I still haven't gotten used to that. But yeah, there's Eris taking off. And that's the end of chapter 5. Let's see what everybody thinks of this. Nothing really wrong with it. Just different. Most stories are made by the same guy. Martial arists. I'm dumb. Martial artists, but arists instead. Lots of endings have people unhappy regardless of how good it is. Really like the web novel ending. I can understand why some people don't like it, but I think it was handled really well. Both swords are made by the same guy. No, he's a pervert. Yeah, that's true. He absolutely is a pervert. Eris, what's wrong with sniffing underwear? Everyone does it. Look, fuck it. She is not joking. There's a lot of nobility that do that, and Eris has done that to Rudius's clothes. So, nothing really wrong with it. Just different. 100% a pervert. You're not wrong. Did she forget she never told him? Yeah, I forgot she's a bloody Millis follower. Yeah, that's why. Shitty Millis. Yeah, it's the Millis followers are not about monogamy, or are all about monogamy and not polygamy. So yeah. Hang on one second. I gotta go get something to clean one of my ears with. I'll be right back. Get a Q-tube. promise I did get the thing I said I was going to get, but I also went and got some ice cream because it's fucking hot and I want some. A redhead always likes a good fight. And even more narrow-minded Christianity. Yeah, Miller's followers remind me of the people you used to argue with in church. Their values on other people's situations. Yeah, it's funny how people of different religions want to tell you how you should behave, but the moment you turn that around and someone tells you, "Oh, you're suddenly attacking my religion. I'm being persecuted." It's like, bro, you don't know what persecution is. Nobody's feeding you to lions. Shut the fuck up. Nobody's putting you in a coliseum. You're not being forced to fight to the death. There's not a witch hunt out for your religion. You're not being persecuted, you poor, poor Christians. Shut the fuck up. Literally, my whole thing is, and I think this is just the way of the world. You don't get to use your religion as an excuse to be an asshole. Just that simple. That's why I wholly believe there needs to be a separation of church and state. Yeah, exactly. Man doesn't have the right to judge others. 100%. I didn't realize we were going to get into a theology debate or a theocracy or just a philosophical debate. But you know what? That's kind of cool. It's weird how Mushoku Tensei. It's weird how Mushoku Tensei brings out that kind of discussion. No, you're good. You're good. We were talking about Millis, and it tends to do that. Mm. I just like what I ended up writing down, and I think it was episode 10. No, it was no, it was actually episode 6, the 10 commandments of how not to be a dick. It's like, and they're enforced with immediate consequences. um, the book brought it up, theology, but the Bible does say humans can judge other humans. Jesus disagreed. Yeah, Christianity do be Christianity. Mm. Okay, apparently I need to check my email real quick. It's just, oh joy. You know what? I'm gonna check it later. I am streaming right now. Or actually, give me just a second. I'm gonna call my mom. Oh no, I'm just gonna text her. I'm gonna text my mommy. I'm gonna text my mom. Feel free to continue the discussion. You'd like to separate business and religion? Yeah, that'd be great. But private companies are private companies. They can do what they want, I guess. Here's my thing: if religion really wants to get into politics and telling, like, if religion wants to get involved in the process of government, um, then simply put, they have to start paying taxes, and they owe a shit ton of back taxes. They owe almost 200 plus years of back taxes. So it's about time for God or gods, whatever you believe in, pay up. Pay up. Because the rest of us would like actual fucking healthcare, thank you. Mm-hmm. Oh, and right off the bat, I can absolutely tell you, first people that need to have all their shit confiscated, have the repo man show up and grab all their shit, televangelists. 100%. Mm. I tell you what, if that does happen, that religions have to start paying taxes, Bible Belt's going to get a little bit slimmer. Because there's a lot of churches that can't afford that shit. They're going to go under. They're going to be abandoned or turned into something else. Can't have that. A lot of these places could not afford to pay taxes. If you want to get involved in politics and the business of telling people how to live their lives, then you don't get to be tax exempt anymore. Oh, the churches in England have to pay? In the U.S., technically all the religious organizations are tax exempt. Oh, they're not? They just don't have enough people going. Mm. You'd be surprised by the amount of people that aren't normally religious. Alrighty. I've had my fun here. 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay. How many chapters are in this? Let's look at the table of contents. Okay, 13. Okay, so I do 5 this week, 5 next week. All right, cool. So 3 more chapters to go. All right, chapter 6. Preparations. Let me pull this up. And not look at the chat anymore. A month had passed since my conversation with the man god. By the way, is the sound good? I should have checked on that. How is the sound? Let me, Okay, there's no squeak or any underlying noise issues, are there? Uh, I just need to know. Sound is good. All right, cool. I'd spent every day of it working on my preparations for the coming battle with Orsted. Killing him would not be easy, to say the least. He was the single strongest person in the world, which meant, of course, that he was far more powerful even than formidable figures like Atofe, Perugius, and Regerd, and I couldn't defeat any of those three. I had a less than zero chance against Orsted in a fair fight. With that in mind, I'd worked out three general priorities. One, I needed to create the magic armor. Two, if I wanted to secure some allies. Three, I had to find a strategy that might work. First and foremost, there was the magic armor project, based on what I'd read in that diary once I had. Based on what I'd read in that diary, once I had it, I would wield physical power comparable to that of the seven great powers. My future self had grown dramatically stronger after creating it. It seemed outright essential. The first thing I'd done was buy a small cabin in the outskirts of the city of Sharia. I'd initially hoped to build the thing in Perugius' floating fortress, but he denied me permission. I'll explain why later. I turned to Cliff and Zenoba for assistance with the project. The two of them immediately agreed to help without pressing me for a detailed explanation. I wanted Cliff to create a control system based on that of the Zayleaf prosthesis, and Zenoba to design the armored shell and its propulsion mechanisms. When I explained the general concept of the magic armor, their eyes lit up with excitement. It didn't take long for them to understand what I had in mind. Powered suits weren't really a thing here, but I guess boys will be boys anywhere you go. Once Cliff and Zenoba were on board, I asked Sylphie and Roxy for their help as well. Roxy acted as the project's general overseer and supervisor. I could conceivably have filled that role myself, but I was the only person capable of creating and modifying the ultra-hard plates of rock that would serve as the thing's actual armor. It was a job that took a lot of time and a lot of mana. I didn't have time to worry about too much else. Sylphie was capable of silently casting earth magic. Also, her research into the displacement incident had left her unusually knowledgeable about magic circles. The girl was pretty damn smart and talented in general, for that matter. Since she can handle almost any task, I wanted her as a general assistant to Roxy, running around to help out wherever she was most needed. When I'd first asked for her help, she said, "Of course, I'm on it," with a big grin on her face. It felt like the first time in a while I'd seen her look that happy. Actually, she'd probably been keeping some less than happy thoughts to herself recently. That made me feel more than a little guilty. Once the magic armor project got rolling, I started to spend some time on it. Item 2, finding allies. My initial plan had been to face Orsted alone, but I knew how powerless I was compared to him. I didn't have my future self's long years of combat experience or his knowledge of magic. Unfortunately, I didn't track down anyone who seemed capable of evening the odds. Batty Gatty was nowhere to be found, and neither was Regerd. Perugius unsurprisingly turned me down flat. Her reasons for doing so weren't exactly comforting either. There are three people in this world you should never try to fight. The technique god, the fighting god, and the dragon god. Even among those three, Orsted is particularly powerful and particularly ruthless. Your determination to protect your family is admirable, and I would love to ask him a few questions about the man god. But I shall be staying out of this. I'd rather not die before Laplace returns, you see. I'd gone in optimistic about my chances of coaxing him into helping out, but it just didn't work out that way. At least he wasn't actively trying to stop me either. I'd have to take that as a win. Apart from Perugius, I simply could not locate anyone who seemed capable of standing against Orsted. Zenoba was incredibly strong and highly resistant to physical damage, so I briefly considered bringing him along, but Atofi had been capable of damaging him with her attacks, despite his blessing. I had to assume the same went for Orsted. The last thing I wanted was to get Zenoba killed. He was my best friend. Of course, I didn't want to see Cliff or Elinelise die either. The more I thought about it, the less I wanted to drag anyone else into this fight. I did consider Eris momentarily. It was hard to guess exactly what she'd get here, when she'd get here. Based on that diary, though, she was probably even more powerful than I'd be with the magic armor complete. Was there any chance she'd join me in the fight against Orsted? It wasn't even a fair question, really. Before I started dragging her into my battles, the two of us needed to sort out our past and where things stood between us. I had no right to expect her help until that happened. With my search for allies at something of an impasse, I redirected my attention to the third item on my list, crafting my strategy for the battle. I needed to run through this fight carefully beforehand. I would be fighting on my own, and I absolutely had to kill my opponent. Given those two premises, I actually had a large number of options available to me. If there were no allies nearby, I kept my distance from my enemy. I could eat. Oh, if there were no allies nearby and I kept my distance from my enemy, I could easily make use of powerful spells with a wide area of effect. The bigger the spell, the more difficult it would be for him to evade. Something like lightning, which concentrated all its power into a smaller area, might be more effective at dealing damage, but I had a feeling that Orsted would simply dodge it. All things considered, barraging him with wide area attacks from a great distance seemed like the smartest approach. The damage would add up eventually, and if I stayed far enough away that he couldn't perceive me, he wouldn't be able to interrupt me with disturbed magic. There was also a chance that I could catch him unaware and smash through his defenses when his guard was down. Setting up a trap might be a bad idea, or might not be a bad idea. I could lure him into a deserted area where he'd find something that would catch his attention. Something that would explode the moment he picked it up. I could use that as my signal to fire magic at him from a distance. The more I thought about it, the more it seemed like the right approach. The question was how. Would I go about luring him to this location? Maybe I could take Nanahoshi as a hostage or send him a message from the man god. Both seemed like they might work. That said, I wasn't optimistic enough to think that my initial long-range attacks would be enough to take him down. There was a chance it might work, but I needed to assume otherwise. Once he found his way to me, it would come down to a close-range fight in my magic armor. I wasn't sure how well my mind could keep up with an ultra-high-speed battle, but there was no point worrying about that until I'd actually taken the magic armor for a spin. As I thought all this over, I found myself remembering my childhood in this world. For a while, I spent a lot of time working on a plan to beat Paul in a fight. I'd been hoping to surpass him while he was still in his prime. In the end, no, I never defeated him even once. Still, the tactics I'd worked out back then were deeply rooted in my mind. I knew how to use magic in coordination with the movements of my body. I knew how to move in 3 dimensions. No matter how overwhelming my opponent might be, my basic approach wasn't going to change. I needed to keep him at a distance, blasting him with attacks while he tried to catch me. I needed to keep the pressure up and force him to make disadvantageous decisions. Sorry. That was how I fought when I was at my best. Of course, Orsted had disturbed magic and his worm gates. There were... There were no doubt other tricks up his sleeve. Okay, there were no doubt other tricks up his sleeve as well. It felt safe to say that this would never go according to plan. The trap and the ambush were a good start. What else did I need to beat him? It was crucial for me to really think this through. I had to consider every possibility, then focus on the more promising ideas. In all honesty, I knew my mind wasn't functioning too well right now. I was impatient and scared and and increasing and increasingly obsessed with my own task. My own? Ah! And increasingly obsessed with my task. It would probably have been wiser to take things more slowly and try out some of my ideas on an experimental basis. The single best plan I could would, not could. The single best plan would probably have involved cornering Orsted slowly and methodically over a period of 10 years or so. But if I were that lackadaisical about this, the man god might change his mind, and I might come home to find I'd lost someone I loved. More than anything else, I was terrified of that. And one night, as my preparations were proceeding, he came to me again. I found myself in that white space. Presumably it was at the center of the barren world. Hey there! Looks like things are coming along nicely, huh? Yeah, I'll fight Orsted just like you asked me to. Now, I didn't ask you to fight him. I just asked you to kill him. You sure look like you're in a good mood today. Are you that happy to have me dancing on your strings? Come on, this is exciting stuff. Even I don't know what's going to happen next. Glad you're enjoying yourself. I wasn't expecting to see you again so soon, though. Does this mean you just made up that stuff about wavelengths aligning or whatever? Oh, yeah, total nonsense. You could have at least pretended to feel a little shame. So I'm guessing the part about I can only appear to certain people was a lie, too? Yeah, pure fiction. But hey, it must have been a nice ego boost to hear you were chosen one, right? Well, whatever. Within the next few days, I'll tell Sylphie and Roxy that I'm planning to fight Orsted. If he does end up killing me, my kids will grow up knowing he's the man who murdered their father. That should be plenty reason for them to hate him, so sorry that's not going to be enough to knock Destiny off track. You need to kill him, or I'll erase your descendants, no matter how long it takes. Do you have to phrase it like that? Well, whatever. In any case, it's going to take me a while to complete the magic armor. We're breaking new ground here, and Cliff's struggling with some of the theories involved. I'm trying to push things along as fast as I can, but I think it'll be another 6 months or so. Cliff should already be capable of designing magic circles to strengthen the rocks. You should focus solely on making the joints in that external shell, since that needs to be as tough as possible. Also, when you're designing the magic circles for the torso, make sure you use the Alistair method rather than the wind system. That should help you pass the tough parts. No kidding. Hang on. That distracted me. I think Mom sit back. Mom literally sent me question marks, even though I could not have been more concise about what I was saying. All right, anyway. Tell Zenobia you want the thing to be a bit more on the bulky side as well. You'll burn more mana that way, but it'll let you layer more magic circles underneath the main ones. Design the circles on the lower layer to repair the more important ones if they get damaged. That should allow you to keep moving even if the thing's half destroyed. Huh? Wait, I didn't know you were an expert on this stuff. Well, I am the man god, you know. I'm familiar enough with the fighting god's armor to give you a few pointers. You know, that reminds me. Don't the people of the world call you the god of men instead? Is there any significance to that? The god of men is something like a nickname of mine, I suppose. It just caught on for some reason, I guess. Man god is my proper name. Why do I feel like you're lying to me yet again? Not that I really care that much about your name. More importantly, do you think I can win? Let's say I build the magic armor, set a trap, and launch a sneak attack. Do I have a chance? Oh, good question. I mean, you've got as much mana as Lapis to work with, right? If you go all out, I bet you'll put up a good fight. That's not super reassuring. Mind being less vague? I wouldn't mind if you dropped me a few more hints on strategy. All right, then. Get yourself some magical implements, the kind that fire off an offensive spell when you feed them mana. Shouldn't be too hard to find those in Sharia, right? They're designed to only consume a little bit of juice, or so ordinary folks can use them. But it's easy enough to modify them so they use more mana. Just like that, Zaylif prosthesis of yours. Make sure a few really powered ones. Make yourself a few really high-powered ones. The sort only you could use. You'll get some new attacks for your you'll get some new attacks for your arsenal and a way to work around disturbed magic. Oh, wow. Gotta say, you're giving me some really detailed advice for a change. Well, you're throwing yourself into this more enthusiastically than I expected. Why wouldn't I help out? I really do want Orsted dead, you know. Can't shake the feeling there's something more to this. For all I know, if I design the magic armor according to your instructions, it'll explode the moment I'd try to activate it. Whose life would you like to bet that on? Whose life would you like to bet on that intriguing theory? Go on, pick. Aisha, Norn, Lilia, or Zenith? Like I've told you, I can't see Orsted's future. That means I can't see the outcome of your battle either. I don't know what's going to happen to you, okay? And that means you don't know for sure that I'm going to lose, correct? Exactly. By the way, if you can't see Orsted's future, how do you know that he's going to join forces with my descendants in the future? I can't see the man himself, but I can certainly see my own future. It involves your descendants, some man I don't recognize, and Orsted surrounding me. 1 second, guys. Just trying to make sure I sent... Okay, I did send it to Mom, so... Okay. You can see anything you're going to experience personally, huh? So what happens after they show up? They just beat you to a pulp or what? Yep, they kill me rather brutally. I don't put up much of a fight. Look, why is Orsted after you anyway? You sure you didn't do anything unspeakably cruel to him? Oh, who knows? I don't recall doing anything to the man himself, at the very least. Either you don't want to tell me or you genuinely don't know. I guess it doesn't matter which. It's not like I can trust anything you tell me anyway. You lie constantly. Now that's a little harsh. The only malicious lie I ever told you was that little fib about the basement, you know. All your advice up to then was just laying the groundwork for that moment, right? Yeah, true. But you know, if you hadn't gone and gotten Roxy pregnant, I wouldn't have needed to do that. Why the hell couldn't you have just told me not to have a kid with her then? Why did you have to make this so complicated? It wouldn't have worked, no matter what I said. You would have knocked her up. That's just the way it had to be, I guess. No matter how many times I tweaked and prodded at the future, it just didn't want to change. Maybe so, but you could have at least... never mind. Sorry for yelling at you. In the end, I did marry Roxy and I did get her pregnant. Now that I think about it, some of the things I did to end up here felt a little strange to me. Out of character, even. I guess that's how this destiny thing works. And I get why you want to change it. I'll do what you want, man god. I'll follow your orders. I'll kill Orsted. But before I do that, there's something I need to say to you. What's that? Once Orsted is dead, I want you to leave me alone for the rest of my life. Don't meddle with my family either. Please. I want you to promise me that. What's this? And here I thought you didn't trust my promises anymore. I don't. Of course I don't. But I have to believe you're not lying about this one thing. If you're not going to let me off the hook no matter what, maybe I'll just join up with Orsted and start working against him. Oh, go right ahead. I can't kill you, sure, and I can't kill him either. But you don't want to see what I can do. You'll find out exactly what it means to make an enemy out of me. You might be bluffing right now. Maybe threatening me is the best you've got. I mean, you had to manipulate me for years before you could get me to make one little mistake. For all I know, you might be talking tough because you're terrified to have me as an enemy. Please. You got a very strong destiny, so I was just trying to nip things in the bud as subtly as possible. Oh, forget it. It's not like you're going to believe anything I say, right? Go ahead. Underestimate me all you want. Bye now. You might live to regret it. No, sorry. I take it back. Give me a minute. Look, All I want is a little reassurance. You say you're going to kill my family if I lose to Orsted, but even if I win, it feels very possible that you'll turn around and kill them anyway. That's not great for my motivation, you know. I need to know there's some point in me doing this. I suppose you're right. Here goes then. In the name of the man god, I swear to honor my promise. Once you defeat Orsted, I won't have anything to worry about. That means I won't need to bother you ever again. I won't speak to, harass, or attempt to harm you, your wives, your mother, your sisters, your descendants, or your pets. You really mean that, right? I'm going to hold you to it. Sure. If you'd like, I'm even willing to offer a little helpful advice if your family ever finds itself in a crisis. I've had enough of your advice for one lifetime, thanks. Oh yeah? Well then, good luck with Orsted. With those final words echoing in my ears, I felt myself sink into unconsciousness. Another month flew by. The construction of the magic armor was coming along smoothly. Following the man god's recommendation, we'd made it larger than I originally intended. The thing stood a good 3 meters tall, about half the size of an aura battler. Come to think of it, the magic armor described in my future self's diary had been more of an ordinary bulky suit of armor. This version would be significantly bigger. Increasing its size had led us to several discoveries. Not only was it easier to design this way, but we could also increase its durability. The man god's advice had been completely legitimate. In other words, When I passed along his other suggestions to Cliff, his eyes lit up with understanding, and he immediately threw himself into his work, then with redoubled vigor. In no time at all, he resolved the thorniest problems he'd been struggling with. I'd expected the project to take at least half a year, but our progress was accelerated significantly. At this rate, we'd be done in another month or so. The entire job would be over a mere 3 months after we'd begun. Under any other circumstances, I might have been full of gratitude toward the man god. It was ironic in a way. My future self had created the magic armor in order to kill him, but now he'd helped us create it. When I thought about it that way, I couldn't help wondering if he really was up to something devious here. But Cliff and Zenoba were the ones actually making the thing. I trusted them completely. I'd also hunted down the magical implements the man god had mentioned. Roxy had helped me out with this. We found what we were looking for quickly enough. The implements in question were small wands activated by the word fire, which launched beginner-tier offensive spells at your target. They were fairly popular, affordable product, and weren't particularly powerful. You'd sometimes find thieves who lacked other ranged attacks carrying them. In some, the man god said that if we modified these so they could withstand my mana output, it would be possible to make them fire off the sort of stone cannon spells I frequently used in battle. As I considered this, an interesting idea had popped into my head. While we were modifying their power, what if we also made it so they could fire a continuous stream of spells, so long as they kept receiving mana? And what if I then bundled 10 or so of them together? I'd have myself a Gatling gun of sorts, capable of pumping out a constant stream of deadly projectiles. When I mentioned the idea to Roxy, she nodded with a neutral expression on her face. Your spells are very impotent, but you can only fire one of them at a time. This might be a way around that limitation. Fortunately, I happened to meet an excellent creator of magical implements recently. Let's see if they'll take the job. The same day, Roxy arranged a meeting with her acquaintance. I was slightly surprised when she turned out to be an elvish woman. There weren't many of her race in Sharia. Elves have pretty faces as a general rule, but hers was caked with soot and her fingernails were black with grime. She was clearly devoted to her job. When I explained my idea, her eyes widened with surprise. Are you sure about that? If I make this thing like you described, every shot is going to take away too much mana. It might drain you to death if you're not careful. I hadn't even considered the idea. Was that what the man god had in mind when he suggested this? Stone cannon didn't consume much mana, but this thing would be capable of firing off tens of thousands of them in a single day. I couldn't bring myself to worry too much about it, though. If I ran out of mana without killing Orsted, I was as good as dead anyway. And I needed to push myself to the very limit if I was going to stand a chance against him. That won't be a problem. Please make it exactly as I described. The elf shrugged, but took the job nonetheless. I would have my short-ranged weapon. Now I just had to... let's see. I would have my short-range weapon. Now I just had to pray it would be capable of damaging Orsted. Rudy? On her way back from the workshop, Roxy struck up a conversation. She said, I don't know who or what you're planning to fight, but will you really need a weapon like that to defeat them? No. I'm sure I'll be fine either way. I was just trying to be reassuring, of course. It didn't work. Roxy narrowed her eyes and pouted in displeasure. You used to be such an honest, sweet kid, Rudy. But lately all you do is lie and hide things from me. The words stung quite a bit. In all fairness, though, I'd done plenty of lying and deceiving when I was a kid. Sorry, Roxy. Oh, that's all right. I'm hiding something from you, too, after all. But you know, Rudy, I'm at least discussing the matter with people I can trust. I'm not saying it has to be me, but I hope you're confiding in someone. You're not trying to face this all alone, are you? Nah, don't worry. I'll be okay. I had a good idea as to what Roxy's secret was. Lately, she hadn't been letting me do anything too active in the bedroom. It was partially because I wasn't asking, but I noticed she was actively steering me away from making the suggestion. Given what I'd read in the diary, she was probably starting to suspect that she was pregnant. She wasn't getting morning sickness yet, as far as I knew, but I'd noticed that her sense of taste seemed to be changing. When was she planning to break the news? Maybe she was waiting for the second trimester, or maybe she was planning to keep quiet until I dealt with my current mission. Either way, I couldn't help hoping that she'd speak up before I went off to fight Orsted. That way, we could have a big party to celebrate. It might be my last chance to throw one. The following day, I paid a visit to Nanahoshi. I'd half expected to be refused entrance to the floating fortress, but they let me in surprisingly easily. Given how scared he was of Orsted, Perugius was being pretty lenient toward me. I ended up asking Silveril about this and received a prompt reply. I kind of thought you wouldn't let me in after last time, you know? Lord Perugius always shows great compassion to those going to their deaths. He has no objection to you saying your farewells to Miss Nanahoshi. Apparently, they were already convinced that I was going to lose, and also die. I was being allowed into the castle as an act of charity. I wasn't complaining, though. It beat getting chased away at the door. I found Nanahoshi looking much livelier than before. Someone had brought a number of her possessions from the university up here, so her room was a bit less barren, too. The Regerd figurine sitting on her windowsill was presumably a gift from Zenoba, and the small decorative cross next to it must have come from Cliff. That was thoughtful of him. It never hurts to have something to pray to when you're struggling. I never had much interest in any gods or relics in my previous life, but my opinions on the matter had evolved a bit. So basically, my preparations are coming along nicely. I think it's time to talk about how we're going to lure him to me. All right, but first, as I'm sure you're well aware, Orsted is extremely powerful. I know. He's also ruthless. I'm not sure how he picks his targets, but when he intends to kill someone, he doesn't hesitate. I spent several years traveling with him, and I never saw him break a sweat in battle. He kills giant dragons in a single... Can you stop trying to scare me, Nanahoshi? I'm sorry, but I do want you to reconsider this. In all honesty, it's madness, plain and simple. Look, I know, I'm sorry. No, sorry. I know, I'm sorry. Well, now she had me feeling even more anxious than before. Did I really have a chance of winning here? What I'm trying to say is I don't recommend fighting him head on. Sure, yeah, I can't see myself beating him in a fair fight, no matter how much I enhance my strength and speed. If I were you, I'd lure him to a specific spot and then attack him with your magic from a distance, while remaining hidden, of course. Anything else come to mind? Let's see. Oh. What? Did you think of something? I'd almost rather not say, but I did decide to help you, I suppose. Right. Nanahoshi swallowed loudly before continuing. Poisoning him might work well. Poison, huh? Detoxification magic could deal with a wide range of toxins, but there were certain diseases and poisons which no known spell could counteract. It was hard to know how effective most of them would be against a monster like Orsted, of course, but there had to be something out there that could harm him. Maybe Ariel could hook me up with something suitable. I had a feeling that everyone in the Osserin royal family was well versed in this kind of thing. Okay. So I set a trap, poison him, and then attack from a distance. Ah, right. Nanahoshi, could I use you as a hostage? A hostage? I suppose so. I'm not sure how concerned Orsted would be with my safety, though. Yeah, that's a good point. I don't want him figuring out you're working with me either. No reason to put your neck on the line, too. Oh, right. I hadn't even thought of that. Yeah, let's not do the hostage thing. The man god was using my family as a hostage at the moment. I knew it was a highly effective way to manipulate someone, but it was also a great way to get them furious and highly motivated. That would seriously backfire on you in the battle. Any other ideas, Nanahoshi? I don't know. Did you read a lot of manga back in Japan? There were plenty of powerful enemies in those, right? I don't think those strategies are going to be too helpful here. The two of us talked it through for a while longer, managing to think up a few somewhat promising ideas. Without exception, they were sneaky, underhanded tricks. It was hard to imagine them doing much against someone as formidable as Orsted. Then again, even the deadliest techniques were just a combination of devious little maneuvers. I had to believe I'd get some results from all of this. Well then, good luck, Rudius. Thanks. Try to come back alive, will you? I don't think I'll ever get home without your help. By the time I left Nanahoshi's room, we'd worked out our plan to lure Orsted to me. Next, I turned to Ariel for help. When I explained that I wanted some poisons no spell could neutralize, she grimaced openly, but nonetheless, she set me up with an introduction to a local underworld organization that she was on good terms with. This group was larger and more sophisticated than your typical pack of bandits. It had grown into something more like a gang or a mafia family. Drug smuggling was their main business, but they also made and sold a variety of poisons. When I got in touch, they directed me to a dilapidated house in a quiet corner of Sharia, where I was escorted to a specific room in the basement. The air was thick with sweet-scented smoke. My contact, a man with one eye, was already waiting for me inside. Hello there, Mr. Grey Rat. Nice to meet you. I hadn't introduced myself, but the man clearly knew who I was. With a big, crude grin, he got right down to business. So tell me, what can I do for you today? You want to make him really suffer for a while, or just kill over right away? Maybe something to make the legs go numb, or swell up some magician's tongue. I've got a lot of potion that can drive any woman wild, too. Perfect for when things start to get perfunctory. Based on that spiel, his inventory ranged from poisons to anesthetics to aphrodisiacs. That suited me perfectly. I'll take everything you've got. Everything? No, I'm not complaining, but that's gonna get a little pricey. That's fine by me. Whew! Okay then. Guess you really want someone dead. Oh, what about that love drug? You want that one too? Well, a thought filtered through my mind. What if Orsted's immune to poison? Killing him with a poison no spell could cure was a simple enough idea. Anyone could have thought about it. And Orsted was cursed to be hated by everyone he encountered. It seemed likely he had some countermeasures in place against this sort of thing. Maybe he was naturally resistant, or maybe he had some kind of miracle potion that could purge any toxins from his system. Yeah, I'll take that too. Sure thing. You want to see that cool, collected beauty of yours melt into a puddle, huh? My wife's sweet as a kitten in bed, actually. No kidding. This is Silent Fits we're talking about, right? Kind of hard to believe, honestly. I had no real reason to believe an aphrodisiac would work on Orsted if poison didn't, but it couldn't hurt to try. Anything that could affect him or distract him was worth a shot. With that thought in mind, I bought everything the man had to offer. In between all of my other preparations, I also took the time to scout out potential battlefields. I intended to fight him on my own, with no one else around. That meant going outside the city, of course. It had to be a spot outside Sharia's walls, where no one was likely to go. That offered opportunities to set up traps. I did some research into potential candidates at the Adventurers Guild, and when I found a place that sounded suitable, I headed out to study it in person. I also had a little niece introduce me to an adventurer acquaintance of hers, who gave me detailed lectures on laying and creating traps. The adventurer in question was apparently a former assassin, with knowledge of many different techniques for luring people to their deaths. Many of these traps exploited weaknesses of human psychology in devilishly clever ways. I got some hands-on experience with a few examples. Even though I knew what to expect, I still ended up blundering into them. Personally, I wasn't convinced Orsted would fall for any of them, but they would still give me something of an advantage. On a different note, Linelise gave me some personal lessons in close-range combat. She was an expert at fighting in the front lines of a party, and even though I couldn't say she was on the strong, I wouldn't say she was that strong in a one-on-one duel. She'd been alive for many years, and she had a wealth of practical experience. In her time as an adventurer, she'd faced opponents more powerful than herself on numerous occasions. And despite her relatively average physical capabilities, she'd come out alive every time. That made her knowledge valuable. In that sense, it was a real pity I had no idea where to find Regard, considering everything he'd been through. But there was no point dwelling on it, really. Perugius wouldn't be helping either. I'd just have to manage. Over the course of these lessons and strategizing sessions, I tried my best to visualize how I would move around and fight inside the magic armor. My basic method of attack would be a constant barrage of stone cannon spells fired by the numerous magical implements mounted on my armor. I would probably want to be moving backward for the most part, while keeping up a steady barrage. I could also slow Orsted down with spells like Quagmire and Deep Mist, and if he eventually slipped up, I'd be ready to take advantage. That seemed simple enough. Simple was good. Finally, I unsealed the basement and prayed at my altar for victory in the coming battle. 2 months had passed since I'd killed that diseased mouse. If the words of my future self could be trusted, the virus or germ that caused petrification syndrome would be long dead. Still, as I asked Roxy not to enter the basement for now and required anyone who did to wash their hands and rinse their mouth immediately afterward. It was more for my own peace of mind than anything else. Since I was already down here, I decided to poke around and see if I could find anything that might prove useful against Orsted. The magic items in the basement were mostly pieces of junk. They'd also been frozen solid by my frost nova 2 months ago, but this apparently hadn't damaged them. They all seemed to function as before. We had a hat that would splash water on your head when you tried to take it off, a helmet with a gem mounted on the front that shone like a flashlight when you put it on, a little box that would belch clouds of smoke when you opened it, a short sword with a blade that turned to rubber when you tried to stab something, a pair of shoes that would emit a foul odor every time you took a step in them, etc., etc. I tossed them into storage just in case, but I didn't see how many of them could be useful, other than as props for some kind of street performance. Maybe that little box could provide a smokescreen, at least. Theoretically, it would be nice to somehow replace all of Orsted's equipment with these stupid things, but I couldn't see how I would manage that. Also, he'd probably just take them off. I grabbed a few of them at random anyway. You never knew what might come in handy. Before I left the basement, I turned back to my altar and said another silent prayer for victory in battle. It's always best to ask twice for the really important stuff. All of my preparations were coming together, and yet the lingering sense of anxiety in the back of my mind never went away completely. Not even for a moment. And that's chapter 6, gang. Look at that. 6 o'clock. We're moving through it. The water hat sounds like an April Fool's gag. A lot of this stuff does. Yeah, what Spider said. Just look at Shameless Tensei slime book. Tensor. Hey guys, 3 days and the next volume of Slime comes out. Really looking forward to that. All right, those are the ones that God tier spells deal with. When you could actually use magic, of course you could use manga as a reference. There you go, man. All right, we're gonna just jump back into the whole thing. I'm not gonna have much of a chat about volume 6 or chapter 6. Not a huge amount went on. It was just your typical preparation stuff. Moving on. Chapter 7, Readying for Battle. Time marched on, indifferent to my concerns, and soon enough, another month had passed. Oh, sorry. Let me redo that. Time marched on, indifferent to my concerns, and soon enough another month had passed. The magic armor, Mark 1, was now complete. Somehow we'd finished the project in only 3 months. I'd thrown a lot of money at it near the end, hiring additional workers to cover the more monotonous tasks, which had definitely sped things up. Just as I'd anticipated, the thing ended up standing about 3 meters tall. However, the entire frame was covered in thick, crude plates of armor that I created, which lent it a surprisingly squat and stout appearance. It wasn't exactly stylish, in other words. You got in from behind, there was a hole in its back shaped for a human, which you basically just climbed into. Once you were feeding it mana, it acted as an extension of your own body, so you could manually close the rear armor over you. That section of armor also contained a special magic circle that would automatically eject you out of the back if you spoke the correct command. We'd mounted the Gatling gun on the right arm. The modified magic implement now automatically fired off stone cannon spells whenever I wanted it to. When I fed it as much mana as I could, it was capable of shooting my very deadliest stone cannon 10 times per second. It would reduce your average monster to a bloody mist in the blink of an eye. This was my main plan for coping with Orsted's disturbed magic. On the left hand, we mounted a stone of absorption. For the most part, I was planning to ward off Orsted's spells with disturbed magic, but it was possible I wouldn't have time if things got too hectic. This stone could dissipate magic. That had already been completely could dissipate magic that had been completely formed. Sorry, I got tripped up by the changing of the page. It would let me deal with any spells I wasn't quick enough to stop preemptively. I had a feeling it might come in handy. We'd also given it a shield that could serve as a melee weapon of sorts. I wasn't bad with a sword myself, but I knew I couldn't compete with Orsted on that front. I'd concluded that it would be better to focus on defense at close range, and honestly, smacking him with a giant heavy slab of rock might do more damage anyway. The best offense was a good defense. It was the same concept as a tank, basically. However, I'd also mounted one of Paul's old weapons at the tip of the shield. It was the magic sword I'd given to Aisha, rather than the one Norn now owned. I didn't know if its ability to ignore an enemy's defense would work on Orsted, but it was worth trying everything I could. The end result wasn't exactly majestic. The magic armor was painted in a camouflage pattern, which felt almost out of place here as the bulky Gatling gun on its arm. The huge, clunky shield with a blade at its tip didn't have much aesthetic value either. At the moment, the thing was lying face down on the ground in a field on the outskirts of Sharia. It was so incredibly heavy that I'd have to get inside and feed it mana just to stand it up. Oh, now that's a fearsome suit of armor. Indeed, its sheer bulk is quite imposing. I don't know, I might have gone with something a little sleeker. Agreed, to be perfectly honest, I think it looks absurd. Is that some kind of monster, Rudy? Couldn't you have gone with a different color? Cliff and Zenoba nodded in satisfaction as they examined the finished product, but the women reacted much less favorably. Maybe this sort of thing just appealed more to boys. On the other hand, Julie was studying it with a fairly satisfied expression on her face, so that clearly didn't apply across the board. If I made it back in one piece, I'd have to see what Aisha and Norn thought. Well, whatever. We hadn't designed this thing to look cool. Okay, everyone, I said, turning to face the group. I think it's time to get started with the final test run. Sylphie, Roxy, Zenoba, Cliff, Alinalius had all come to watch. Julie and Ginger had tagged along as well. Nanahoshi wasn't here. She'd agreed to help lure Orsted to me, but her main objective was still to return to her own world. As a precaution for her safety, we were pretending I had coerced her into cooperating with me. For that reason, she couldn't be seen with us right now. She was probably studying summoning magic with Perugius back at the floating fortress at the moment. Of course, there was a chance that Orsted would end up killing her regardless, but when I mentioned this to her, she nodded queasily and accepted that risk. All right, I suppose I'll look on from a safe distance then. With those words, Roxy headed over to the chairs we'd set up for our spectators, taking Julie with her. Her baby bump wasn't conspicuous just yet, but you could see it if you looked for it. She probably wasn't going to be able to hide it much longer. Hopefully she'd make the big announcement soon. And again, going off to battle with a pregnant wife waiting for you at home was a classic way to get yourself tragically killed. Okay, no, don't even think about it. The more anxious you get, the harder it becomes to focus. I was going to win this fight. My wife was going to have her kid, and I was going to name them. And then I was going to get started on making baby number 3. That was what my future looked like. Yeah! Okay, I'm going to climb inside now. Sylphie, Zenoba, and Alinalius, I want all 3 of you to come at me at once. Cliff, you just keep your eye on identification, your eye of identification active, and let me know if you notice anything. Sure, Rudy. Certainly, Master. Sylphie and Zenoba stepped forward at once, but to my surprise, Alinalius raised her hands in the air and backed away instead. I'm sorry, Rudius, but I think I'll just be spectating today. I'd rather not get injured. Come to think of it, that diary said Alinalius had gotten pregnant at some point. When I studied her physique carefully, I thought I could make out the beginnings of a bump. It'd be a little thoughtless inviting her to scrap with me. Ah, right. Wouldn't want anything to happen to the baby. Why don't you go sit with Roxy? What? Yelped Cliff. The baby? Spinning around, he stared at Alinalius's belly intensely. Alinalius, are you pregnant? Well, my curse has been inactive for some time now, so yes, I probably am. Your curse is inactive? But we've been carrying on as usual. That we have. Wait, It's not Rudius's baby, is it? Are you trying to make me angry, Cliff? But I mean, if it's that hard to believe, why don't you take a look yourself? Maybe that eye of yours will tell you something. Okay. Cliff pulled his eye patch aside and stepped closer to Alinalius, and then closer still. He ended up with his face about 2 inches from her lower abdomen. From all appearances, he was attempting to stare right into her womb. This close-range examination didn't seem to be sufficient, though, as he reached out and began to slowly lift up her skirt. Oh my. You do know we're in public, dear. Could you just be quiet for a minute? Hissed Cliff intensely. Please. All right. Alinalius replied with a little shrug of her shoulders. To be fair, it did look more than a little obscene the way he was crawling under her skirt, that skirt of hers. Maybe I could try something like this with one of my wives later. Sylphie would definitely look good in one of those. This probably isn't something I should be spending my mental resources on right now. It's true! Cliff emerged from under his wife's skirt, his face as pale as a sheet. Apparently, the eye of identification could serve as a pseudo-ultrasound. Maybe the word pregnant had popped into his vision or something. What now? What do we do? Oh, nothing in particular, but it's not an easy process, is it? There are all sorts of... Cliff, I've been through this many times already. I'll be fine. You just let me handle things, and I'll give birth to a healthy baby. Right. Cliff's face wasn't getting any less pale. He seemed shell-shocked all of it at the suddenness of it all. In any case, that wasn't very tactful of you, Rudius, Lindley said, glancing in my direction. Did Roxy let the cat out of the bag? No, she didn't say anything. I just had a hunch, I guess. I see. Well, Hopefully you can understand why I'd rather not get involved in any brawls at the moment. Of course, sorry about that. And Lynn fluttering one hand in the air, walked off toward the spectator area, where she took the seat next to Roxy. The two of them immediately struck up a conversation. I had a pretty decent idea of what the topic might be, considering that Roxy was rubbing a hand over her own stomach. The two of them must have gotten pregnant at almost exactly the same time. Momentous as all this was, however, we had other things we needed to focus on at the moment. Okay, everyone, back to business. Let's get this test started. Sylphie and Zenoba nodded, their faces turning serious. An hour later, I called the test complete. The magic armor had performed stupendously. My top speed felt something like 200 kilometers per hour. I could jump several meters into the air and with ease, and my punches hit hard enough to leave an impact crater on the ground. Sylphie struggled to land a single spell on me, and any magic that did hit me just bounced back. I couldn't even feel Zenoba's fearsome punches. In fact, he ended up breaking his hand on my armor and screaming in pain. The project was a success. I was capable of dealing physical damage to a blessed child like Zenoba, which meant it would be capable of harming Orsted as well. For once, it felt like I'd managed to achieve my goal completely, without screwing up even once along the way. That felt nice. Then again, I couldn't really take the credit here. Zenoba and Cliff had made the project possible. Why did I say project? That's so dumb. Maybe this was something like what it felt like to fight under the protection of battle aura. This kind of power was intoxicating. I was beginning to understand why the likes of Perugius and Atofe had grown so arrogant over the years. Had I evened the playing field enough? Did I stand a chance now? Yeah, it could work. I could do this. One way or another, my preparations were now complete. That same evening, Roxy finally made the big announcement. I think it's about time I told you, everyone. It seems I'm pregnant. She spoke up just before dinner. Norn appeared to be at home that evening as well, so the whole family was present. Congratulations! How very exciting! Lilia was the first to react. Although she usually kept her emotions somewhat hidden, there was a big smile on her face right now, and it looked completely genuine. For a moment, I thought it might have something to do with her feelings about her own daughter's position in the family, but it seemed more likely that Roxy had consulted her in advance. That would also explain why the meal on our dinner table looked a bit fancier than usual. Congratulations, Roxy! Sylphie's reaction was similar. Either Roxy had gone to her for advice, or she'd had a hunch this was coming. She accepted the news easily with a warm smile on her face. For some reason, the sight of that smile hit me with a flash of déjà vu. In a sense, this was similar to the day when Lilia revealed her pregnancy. There were many differences, of course. Zenith and Lilia were here, and I hadn't exactly been cheating with Roxy. Well, it might have started out that way, but at least we'd talked things through as a family and worked something out. Sylphie had accepted Roxy. Unlike my old man, I wasn't going to get a slap in the face from my furious wife or see my mistress break down in tears. We'd skipped right to the happy ending part. Rudy? Do you have any thoughts? Evidently, a bit unnerved by my silence, Roxy turned to me with an apprehensive look on her face. There was only one thing to say, of course. I'm incredibly happy. Thank you, Roxy. Huh? What are you thanking me for? Exactly. Roxy tilted her head quizzically to one side with a confused half smile. She didn't seem to understand my reaction, but she didn't look upset either. There you go again, Rudy, said Sylphie with a chuckle. He said the same thing to me when I told him about Lucy, you know. Did I? Yeah, maybe I did. Why would that be my default response, though? Well, I'm glad you're pregnant with my baby, and I'm glad you felt comfortable telling me about it. It feels like proof that you've truly accepted me, I guess. I thought I'd proven that to you quite some time ago, but what? I leaned forward, picked Roxy up, and pulled her onto my lap. I usually tried not to get too lovey-dovey with her in front of Sylphie, but today was going to be an exception. You've given me all sorts of gifts, taught me all sorts of things, and helped me many, many times. And now, just to top it off, you're even going to have a baby with me. I don't know what to say other than thank you. I'm so grateful that I met you, Master Roxy. Goodness, it's been a while since you called me that. Gently, I ran a hand over Roxy's belly. She was probably about 3 months into her pregnancy by now. I could feel a definite bump. I'd been through this once already with Sylphie, but it still felt kind of surreal. Listen, Rudy, you're my husband now, and I wanted to have a baby with you. If you feel the need to praise me, I think something like well done or good work would be more appropriate. Wouldn't that sound kind of arrogant? Come on, please. Can't you let me have my way every once in a while? Well, okay then. Well done, Roxy. Oh, it was nothing, really. As she spoke these words, Roxy pressed her head against my chest and snuggled in. She sure seemed to be taking this calmly. I felt like Sylphie had been a little more nervous. Then again, it seemed like Linelise and Lilia both knew about Roxy's pregnancy in advance. Maybe she'd reassured herself by talking to lots of different people about her situation. Maybe she'd turned to them because of how busy I'd been lately. The idea made me feel guilty. I was turning into one of those absentee dads, one of those absentee dads, too busy to pay attention to his family. Although it wasn't like I was off climbing the corporate ladder or anything. Really? Yawns have to sneak in right there? Wasn't like I was off climbing the corporate ladder or anything. I squeezed Roxy tightly in my arms, pressed my face to the back of her head, and bared my nose in her hair. Her scent was as wonderful as ever. It really put my heart at ease. Rudius? Yelped Norn, thumping her hands against the table for emphasis. Can you try to contain yourself? I'm going to lose my appetite. I glanced over. Her face was red as a tomato. Come on, cut them a little slack, chided Aisha. Roxy is always so considerate, you know? She deserves some affection tonight. For some reason, she was leaning forward on the table with her chin in her hand and a smirk on her face. You're just cranky because Rudius isn't giving you any attention lately, right? What? No! Yelped Norn. I am not! Look, I mean, things are a little complicated, right? Think about how Sylphie and Lucy must feel. I just think they should keep this sort of thing behind closed doors. Oh, you're not fooling me. You know, brother dear, you really should make the time to catch up with Norn. She's very popular at school lately. Just the other day, some boy stopped by the house to leave her a letter. Aisha! Who said you could tell him about that? Ah, so Norn had attracted her first swarm of admirers? Well, she was adorable and hard-working, too. The boys had good taste, I'd give them that. Someday, down the line, she'd probably get a boyfriend. She'd get married and leave my house for good. I wanted to be supportive, of course, but if she fell for some no-good playboy, it would be hard not to intervene. I tried to picture Norn bringing home some kid with bleached blonde hair, pierced ears, and a teardrop tattoo under one eye. Your little sister's teaching me what true love really is, man. Can we, have your blessing? It didn't seem very plausible, fortunately, but if things did turn out that way, I'd have to try and smile politely before freaking out. Do you have anyone you're fond of, Norn? Anyone I'm fond of? As another blush spread slowly across her face, Norn turned away from me and pouted, Of course not. So there was someone in the picture, huh? Nothing unusual about that. She was getting to that age, after all. Whoever he was one lucky kid. Okay, I get the picture. If things start getting serious, you make sure to bring him over to meet their family, okay? Are you even listening to me? Once she brought the boy back home, I'd have to size him up carefully in Paul's stead. That and dispense a few fatherly threats. The words, "You'll take my little girl away over my dead body," were going to get bellowed at some point. Anyway, what about you, Aisha? You're always babbling about how happy Rudius will be when you show him that rice from the garden. Hey! Shouted Aisha, jumping out from her seat. I was going to make a big announcement about that later. You're horrible, Norn. Serves you right, said Norn, turning away sulkily. To which we now get this. So cute. Wait, did she just say what I thought she said? Hold on, Aisha, you harvested the rice from the garden? Well, yeah, I think it's been a little too cold though, so I didn't get that much. But if I get replanting now, by fall we should replanting? Does that mean you harvested seed rice too? It does, doesn't it? Yeah, I did. You're acting a little weird, Rudius. What's the matter? I'm acting perfectly normal, I assure you. What about next year? Will we have another crop next year? Well, as long as you make more of that soil with your magic, sure. It grows a lot better and that stuff. I gently picked Roxy up and sat her down on the floor next to me. Then I rose to my feet, moved to the side of the table, and kneeled 3 steps from Aisha's chair with my arms spread wide. Well done, Aisha! Yay? Should I be jumping into your arms right now or something? Aisha slowly walked toward me while glancing repeatedly in Roxy's direction, then hopped gingerly into my embrace. I grabbed her from either side, hoisted her in the air, and started spinning her around. Woo! It's rice! Aisha! Rice! Woo! I could finally eat rice again. It was a minor thing compared to Roxy's pregnancy, but I loved rice with a passion. Nothing could compare to a big plump mound of fluffy white goodness, especially when you paired it with some nice salty grilled fish. Soon enough, I could make that happy dream a reality. As I spun Aisha around and around, a fresh surge of joy spread through my body. Roxy and I were going to have a baby. Lucy was going to have a little brother or sister, about 2 years younger than her. The kid would be half meagered, of course. Hopefully she wouldn't get bullied or anything. What color would her hair turn out to be? Would Lucy be a good big sister? Hopefully they'd get along with Norn and Aisha, too. I can't wait. What should we name? Oh, right. There's a taboo about that, isn't there? A whole bunch of other thoughts swirled through my head in quick succession until I couldn't even keep track of them anymore. After Roxy's announcement, we had ourselves a modest little celebration. The food was nicer than usual, and the conversation around the table was cheerful and energetic. Norn told us stories about her time in the student council. Aisha happily reported that the people at the city market were starting to learn her name. Lucy burst into tears at all the noise, and Sophie comforted her expertly. Lilia served the food quietly, with a gentle smile on her face. Zenith ate silently, but was clearly in a good mood. Roxy was sulking after my overreaction to Aisha's news, so I had to work hard to mollify her. Yeah, you're a dumbass. If you celebrate rice more than you celebrate your wife's pregnancy, you deserve what's coming to you. You're a dumbass. One of the courses that evening consisted of salted rice balls. Aisha had made these personally. When I asked her why she'd chosen rice balls in particular, she explained that Nanahoshi had told her how to make them some time ago. I had to assume that it was the only recipe she knew off the top of her head. The girl clearly hadn't spent much time in the kitchen. Then again, the only recipes I could come up with were on the spur of the moment. Were from equally basic stuff like rice porridge and simple varieties of rice ball. In any case, Aisha's first attempt at handmade rice balls were round and on the smaller side. The first planting had been more of an experiment than anything else, so she hadn't harvested that much rice. Still, there was enough for everyone to try one. Nobody else around the table looked particularly impressed with the flavor, but I savored mine joyfully. Aisha had worked very hard to harvest that rice, and she'd pressed it into a ball with her own little hands. How could the result be anything but delicious? Tears streamed down my cheeks. I slowly chewed and swallowed every bite. The experiment had been a success. That meant we could expect a larger harvest next time. Aisha was going to plant more rice than before, so the next rice balls she made would be bigger. There was no guarantee I'd be around to eat them, though. I've got something I need to tell you, everyone. Once everyone had finished their meal, I finally spoke up, then paused to look around the table. My sisters and my mothers looked startled. My wives seemed to be bracing themselves. I took the time to look all of them in the eyes one by one. Very soon I'm going to be fighting someone. Someone who's incredibly powerful. I decided in advance not to say Orsted's name explicitly. I'm sure you've noticed that I've been acting rather oddly for the past 2 months. Thank you for not pressing me to explain. I know it wasn't easy for you, and I'm sorry I can't explain in detail. There's a good chance I won't win this fight. When I spoke these words, surprise and anxiety flashed across my family's faces. I pressed ahead anyway. This might be the last meal at this dinner. This might be my last meal at this dinner table, in other words. Do you have to fight this person? Said Norn, clearly rattled. Isn't there any other option? No, none that I know of, at least. The man god hadn't stopped by since advising me on how to build the magic armor. Knowing him, however, I had to assume he'd been keeping a close eye on me all this time. But you said you might not win, right? Why would you do something like that? It doesn't... Norn, listen. Norn was the most flustered and confused person in the room. That was perfectly understandable. Aisha and Lilia had still lived under the same roof as me, so they'd probably picked up on the fact that something was going on. Their expressions were grave, but they didn't look especially surprised. If I don't come back, I want you to go into my room and... If you don't come back? Why would you even say that? She did have a point. I'd worked out a nice dramatic line like something out of a story, but why bother with the doomed hero act? Might as well keep a positive attitude. Okay, then. When I do come back, let's take a bath together or something. I don't want to. Take it by yourself. Ha ha! Ouch! Classic Norn. Aisha, yes? If I don't make it back, I want you to take some of those rice balls you made to Nanahoshi, too. Oh! She'll cry with joy, I guarantee it. Once you've given her some of those, she'll do anything you ask her to. I don't really want to win over Miss Nanahoshi, Aisha muttered, her head drooping slightly. I'd rather make you spoil me, Rudius. Aw, isn't that sweet? What a lovable kid. I'll have to buy her a nice present if I make it back alive. I think she's earned a nice big bag or a diamond ring by now. Lilia? Yes, Master Rudius? Take care of my mother, please. I certainly will. However, yes? I'll be waiting for your return, Master Rudius, no matter how long it takes. Lilia's voice was soft but firm. We'd known each other for a long time now, but she'd never managed to get any less formal with me. Aisha was definitely my little sister, but it felt like Lilia didn't really consider herself my mother. Hey, Mom, did you hear all that? I've got to go soon, but I'll be back. I thought I could see a hint of sadness on Zenith's face, but it was hard to tell with her. I had to hope that she'd manage to express her emotions more clearly someday. Sylphie, yeah? Take care of Lucy. Right, Rudy, Go on. What is it? It's nothing, sorry. There was something on the tip of Sylphie's tongue, but I couldn't guess exactly what it was. I loved her very much, of course, but she wasn't easy to read, and it made me anxious sometimes. I reached out under the table and took her hand in mine, then bringing my mouth to her ear, I spoke to her in a whisper. Sylphie? Yeah? This might piss you off a little, honestly. Okay. But if I make it back, let's get really busy. Sylphie's head jerked forward at this. Maybe I'd taken the wrong approach here? Good grief, why are you always so naughty, Rudy? She whispered, slapping me lightly on the shoulder. I took the opportunity to grab her hand and pull her close. Ah! It was a sudden, relatively forceful kiss. Sylphie stiffened in surprise but didn't pull away. She was as cute as heck today. Not that she wasn't cute at any given moment. Sylphie was cute by definition. I was going to come back home to her. When I told that to myself, it started to feel true. Come on, Rudy. Everyone's watching. Yeah! Just for good measure, I took some time to lick one of her long, pointed ears, pausing to nibble on it gently. By the time I released her, there were visible bite marks on it. Don't worry, I'll come back. Just be patient, okay? Okay, murmured Sylphie, her face bright red. I'll try my best. With that, I turned to the last person at the table. Roxy. Yes, Rudy? Let's sleep together tonight, okay? But the baby's... Well, all right. She hesitated briefly at my offer, but ended up nodding in agreement. That evening, Roxy and I took our bath and headed to my bedroom together, holding hands. Last year, this sort of thing had been enough to get me worked up and raring to go, but under these circumstances, well, there was no way I could get myself in the mood. All right, then, as long as you're gentle, That's okay, Roxy. I think we should skip that tonight. Roxy had already started to take off her nightgown, but I held up a hand to stop her. She paused, her hand still on her sleeve, and tilted her head quizzically. Come on, have a seat. I gestured to the bed. Once Roxy settled on it, I took a seat in my chair rather than joining her. I want to give you the details of the situation and explain what might happen if I lose. Why just me? What about Sylphie? You're willing to trust me and Nanahoshi, but not her? How do you know I've been talking to Nanahoshi? It's Sylphie's theory, not mine. We've been talking to each other about the situation for a while now. Is there some reason you don't want Sylphie to know all the details? That's a good question, actually. Why was I doing this? I wasn't sure, but for some reason I didn't want to tell Sylphie everything. Maybe I didn't want to worry her. No, that wasn't it. But why then? Seriously, why? Was this that destiny thing at work again? I'm happy you're willing to consult me, of course, but I feel quite bad for her at this point. Yeah, you're right. Roxy, I'll go get her now. Glad to hear it. Roxy was always right, wasn't she? I was so lucky to have her around. I left Roxy in my bedroom for the moment and made my way over to Sylphie's room. As my hand found the doorknob, though, I hesitated for a moment. Now that I thought about it, I'd never looked in on Sylphie on Roxy night before. What if she was crying herself to sleep in there or something? Yeah, okay. I can follow his train of thought because I tend to overthink things too. But you're an idiot. And I say that to myself when I tend to overthink things as well. I call myself an idiot. Ah. Sylphie always said that she was okay with me falling in love with other women. She'd welcomed Roxy to the family warmly, and she'd accepted the possibility of Eris joining us as well, but it was possible that she felt very different deep down inside. What if she was sobbing right now? What if she... Uh... What if she was hammering little spikes into a voodoo doll, or biting a lacy handkerchief, hissing, "That little hussy," to herself? Nah, it's gonna be fine. Surely my sweet little Sylphie isn't capable of that. Sylphie, can you come to my room for it? He just chomped on my ear like that. Oh, you should have heard the way he murmured, "Let's get real busy." Eee! What's he gonna do to me? I bet it's gonna be that first night all over again. What do I do, Lucy? You might have a little brother or sister on the way soon. When I opened the door, I found Sylphie rolling around on her bed with her arms wrapped around a pillow, kicking her legs in girlish excitement. She'd been talking fairly softly, but once the door was open, I could hear every word clearly. It was a little hard to believe this girl was already the mother of a child. On the other hand, it was an extremely adorable sight. I was sorely tempted to pounce on her. Fortunately, Lucy wasn't in the room, as she slept in Lilia's bedroom. But then again, this room wasn't soundproof. God, get a hold of yourself. Roxy's waiting for you, remember? Ah. Our eyes met. Sylphie stopped dead in mid-roll with her back on the bed, her butt up against the wall, and her legs stretched up toward the ceiling. A big, creepy grin was frozen on her face. In a gesture of compassion, I closed the door without a word. Everybody does things they wouldn't want anyone to see, right? Hey, no, Rudy, wait! You've got it all wrong, don't you? Don't go! Moving with impressive speed, Sylphie popped out of her bed and rushed forward, catching the door just before I shut it completely. Well, I wasn't going anywhere, just thought we might want to retry that from the top. What? You don't have to do that. Do you need something? It's Roxy's night, isn't it? Oh, maybe it's one of those days. Do you want me to swap in? The girl clearly wasn't thinking straight at the moment. She seemed to think Roxy's period had suddenly started, despite the fact that Roxy was pregnant. You didn't see her like this every day, or very often at all, really. Charming as it was, though, it was about time I got things back on track. I wanted to tell you about the person I'm going to fight and what might happen afterwards. Can you come over to my room? Sylphie fell silent for a few seconds, then nodded quickly with a serious expression on her face. I thought I saw a hint of happiness in her eyes as well. I felt a little relieved myself for whatever reason. The explanation itself didn't take too long. Sylphie and Roxy listened quietly as I told them that my opponent was the dragon god Orsted. and that I'd been ordered to fight him by someone called the Man God, who visited me in my dreams. I explained that if I died, there were a few things they had to do. First, consider Orsted an enemy, but never challenge him directly. Second, never trust any advice given by the Man God. And third, pass down both those instructions to future generations of our family. I also mentioned that after my death, they should tell the rest of the family everything I'd told them, and try to think of ways to keep each other safe. I did my best to convey how serious the information really was. The three of us had started off sitting on the bed, but as the conversation continued, I found myself lying down with Roxy and Sylphie, cuddled up on either side of me. If I end up losing, there's a chance something horrible might happen to Roxy during her pregnancy, or to Lucy for that matter. Something horrible? Um, Basically you're saying this man god might do something to us? Yeah. Oh, now I get it. So that's why you kept telling us to keep an eye on the house lately. Sylphie nodded to herself, looking like she'd just solved a puzzle. I had a feeling she was misunderstanding my motives slightly. That was convenient in a way, but maybe I needed to say something. Okay, I get it, Sylphie continued. But you know, Rudy, I can take care of myself, and you don't need to ask me to protect my daughter either. I'd give my life for her in a heartbeat. Don't worry about me either, Roxy added. I kept myself alive for many years, and I'm not planning to get careless now. I might be weaker than you, but please don't assume I'm helpless. On second thought, I couldn't see a reason to say anything. They were both a little fired up, and that was all for the best. In any case, Orsted of the Seven Great Powers is quite the opponent, Roxy continued. Do you think you can win? I'm not sure, I replied honestly. I've only fought him once before. What happened? He overwhelmed me. Easily. Even after all this time, remembering that first encounter with the dragon god made my legs tremble. He'd beaten Regerd in an instant, easily knocked Eris out of the fight, and stabbed his hand deep into my body. The man was terrifying. Rudy, are you sure we shouldn't all go together? Nah, I'll do this alone. I think that gives me the best chance of winning. I'll fire off lots of huge spells and chip away at his defenses from a distance. That does make sense, but you're trembling, you know? Yeah. Hey, what? Hands off, Rudy. Stop trying to distract me. In my defense, I'd started touching Sylphie because I wanted to distract her. I hadn't started touching Sylphie because I wanted to distract her. I just wanted to feel her up. If Orsted killed me, I wouldn't get another chance to touch these. Or this right here either. Or that. Or this, for that matter. God, come on! We're having a serious conversation right now, right? Yep. You know what, Rudy? Lucy's scrawling around all over the place now. She can get anywhere she wants. Lilia said she reminds her of the way you were as a baby. Also, she's picking up lots of new words. At this rate, I bet she'll be toddling around the place in less than a year. I hadn't been helping out much at all with raising Lucy. I was leaving it entirely to Lilia and Sylphie. Still, I knew how incredibly cute she was, at least. I'm really looking forward to that, Rudy. Me too. If it seems like you're going to lose, make sure you run for it, okay? Yeah. I don't know if I'll be able to get away from him, but I'll try. Was Lucy old enough to understand what was happening around her yet? If I died in this battle, she probably wouldn't even remember the face of her own dad by the time she grew up. What would that feel like? It was hard for me to imagine, but maybe I could find a tactful way to ask Aisha. Rudy? Roxy had spoken up from my left. I reached out to grope at her chest as well, but she seized hold of my arm before I could. Oh, that's some impressive grip strength. Ow! Sorry! I know! We're having a serious conversation! I'm glad I met you, Rudy. I'm glad I married you and had a child with you. I've never been happier in my entire life than I am right now. To be honest, I never thought I'd find this kind of happiness. Right. But there's a downside, I suppose. If you go off and get yourself killed, you'd be making me sadder than I'd ever been before. Right. It's a little embarrassing to even say this sort of thing, but Roxy paused for a moment, inhaled deeply, then finished her sentence. Please make me happy, Rudy. I hadn't made the wrong decision after all. I was going to fight for Roxy and Sylphie. I had to fight for these two and then come back home to my family. All my doubts had finally evaporated. A few days later, with all my preparations finally complete, I set out for the magic city of Sharia. I was entirely alone. That's chapter 7. Yay! We've got one more chapter, Quagmire versus Dragon God, which I will get to shortly, but right now one eye is kind of leaking and one nostril is kind of runny, so I'm going to go work on some of that for a second. Holy horny. Hella horny. Everybody's horny. That's right. Rudius did cook when they were on the road. Rudius did do the cooking. Get a room. Oh, wait. It's their house. No comment. Oh, damn, bro. Onayori rice. Onayori rice. Oh, man. Onigiri, I think you were trying to say. Rice balls. Onigiri. Sophia is going to have an aunt or an uncle on the way. And this time there'll be a tribrid too. Elven family trees, huh? That's not how that works, I don't think. Right? Jesus Christ. Rage, there's no such thing as a full house anymore. They just keep going. They just keep going until we get to the end. Alright, I'm gonna go hopefully blow my nose and empty some of it out. Ugh. Elf, beast, folk, human mix. I don't think that's how that works, but okay. Well, I mean, yes, but I don't think that's the ant thing you're talking about. I don't think that's how it works. I believe it's 7 o'clock. Oh, fuck. I was not ready for that. pressure got released, and now my eyes are watering. Oh man. Oh. Oh. I think her dad was the elf, and her mom was the beast person. Oh, I don't think Ghislaine is her aunt, if that's what you're saying. Lynn-Lise is Sylphie's dad's mom. So Sylphie's dad's mom's daughter is her. Oh, that. Gotcha. Okay. Oh, that's what you meant. I thought you were talking about Ghislaine showing up because you talked about beast folk, and I was like, what? That's where I got confused. Okay. Shit, dude. Jesus. Oh, man. All that just pressure got released, and so everything is flowing out. Also, Lucy is mostly there we go. Lucy is, even though Lucy's mostly human, she does have elf ears. Yeah, sorry about that, guys. It's just I've got like all this pressure right here on this side of my face, the left side of my face, and like it's all built up. And this is a common thing that I live with every day. That's why you constantly hear me sniffling and stuff. Oh. Huh. I wish I didn't have this shit. And so because of sinuses, I get the tension in here and I get like micro headaches and stuff like that. Like, oh, Jesus. There Here's the thing. I know it's normal to breathe out of one nostril, only 25% of one nostril, and completely out of the other. But but that's not how it works for me. I get whichever nostril has decided to work, the other one just doesn't. Like there's just a blockage, and it creates all this pressure, and it just builds up. And I don't know if that's a new thing. I don't know if that's like something that's developed as I got older, or if I've always had this. But like, there's this pressure on my eyes and shit too, and it just, oh man. Sylphie is bestial in some ways. Gotcha. Which is hilarious because the most bestial of all of them is actually Eris. And she's the complete human. Alrighty. That having been said, though, let's get back to it. Whew. Chapter 8 Quagmire versus Dragon God. 2 days north by northeast from the city of Sharia, there was an abandoned village that had been swallowed by the forest. Some 40 years ago, a magical catastrophe had caused the local woods to expand rapidly. The village had been quickly overrun, forcing its inhabitants to relocate. In the decades since, the only visitors to this place had been monsters that roamed the forest and the occasional adventurer who claimed to hunt them. Today, however, a man was making his way toward this village. A man with silver hair and golden eyes, who wore a white leather coat. The man monitored his surroundings alertly as he approached his destination. He wasn't on horseback or riding in a carriage, he was simply walking along, striding calmly through the forest. Sometimes his sharp, intense eyes would glance down at a compass-like object in his left hand. Pardon me. No monsters ventured to attack him. Many glittering eyes peered out at him from the depths of the woods, but when he drew close, even the fiercest creatures fled like frightened squirrels. Okay. Mm. There we go. Sometimes, okay. Is this it? As he reached the outskirts of the abandoned village that his compass was pointing toward, the man paused and studied it in silence for a moment. Why would she call me to a place like this? Slowly, cautiously, he set foot into the ruined town. Its once neat streets were covered in weeds, and its fields were now thickets. Great trees rose through the roofs of empty houses. Others were overgrown with vines were so overgrown with vines that they resembled great green mounds of vegetation. No, press the wrong. There we go. Soon the man came to a halt once more. He reached the center of town where a well had once presumably been located. A conspicuous structure stood there, a tall yellow cylinder of a building, and it was the only thing in the entire town that had no trace of vegetation on it. From the condition of its stone walls and its front door, it had clearly been constructed recently. The man looked down at the compass in his left hand and confirmed that its needle was pointing directly at this tower. He reached for the doorknob somewhat warily. Nanahoshi, are you there? The interior of the tower was extremely plain. There were no windows or hallways. The floor was oddly slick, as if coated in some sort of oil. Someone had left a number of bulging burlap sacks and something like an incense burner up against the wall. The strange scent in the air seemed to indicate the burner was in active use. What is this place? Oh. Oh, man. Could you guys just stop, swarming around in front of my eyes? Oh, man. Anyway. Glancing around the room, the man spotted another door in the wall straight across from him. Cautiously, but without hesitation, he strode up to it and reached for the doorknob. As he did so, he felt a small prick of pain. When he examined the palm of his hand, however, there wasn't so much as a speck of blood. Am I imagining things? He stepped through the door and found himself in a room with a layout identical to the first. Given that it was sitting on a slope, it appeared that a part of this building was actually underground. The man was growing increasingly suspicious, but nonetheless proceeded forward. Signs bearing messages such as "Please remove your footwear here" and "All guests put on this hat" were posted on the walls. Naturally, he ignored their instructions and continued more warily than before. Some of the doors were rigged with traps so small they might have been intended for mice. Carefully avoiding these, he pressed on, perhaps through one room or passing through one room or another. Eventually, he arrived at a very strange room. It was tall and circular, had no ceiling whatsoever. When he looked up, he could see a slice of sky above him. It felt as if he were standing at the bottom of a chimney. What's going on here? Dubious, the man furrowed his brow, but the needle in his compass was pointing toward the center of the room. A small box sat there, a single sheet of paper underneath it. He approached it warily and looked at the paper. There were 2 words written on it. Man God. He quickly snatched up the box and flipped it open. Great clouds of smoke immediately burst out of it. As he dropped it and assumed a defensive stance, the man heard a small metallic clink. A silver ring had fallen to the ground next to the little box, which was somehow still discharging smoke with remarkable intensity. The ring had presumably popped out of the box when it hit the ground. For some reason, it blinked with a faint red light, and the needle of his compass pointed directly at it. Nanahoshi? The man reached down to pick up the ring. A split second later, there was a great flash in the sky. Gah! The man instantly kicked at the ground, trying to jump aside, but the oil-slick floor refused to cooperate. The soles of his boots lost their grip entirely. A huge bolt of lightning slammed down on the dragon god Orsted. And now we switch perspectives. I'm going to make it through this, I swear to God. From my campsite above the abandoned village, I stared intently down at the spot to which I'd lured Orsted. The very instant I'd seen that smoke rising into the air, I'd fired off a lightning at the target location with all the power I could muster. I was confident I'd landed a hit on him. I'd practiced many times in preparation for this day, and I'd coated the floor in vegetable oil so he couldn't evade my spell at the last moment. But of course, one hit wasn't going to be enough to bring him down. Nobody that fragile could have earned a reputation as the strongest in the world. Not with monsters like a Tofi around. I jabbed my staff into the ground, fed it a surge of mana, and visualized an enormous thundercloud, a dark, turbulent supercell. This was the Saint Tyr water spell Cumulonimbus. In an instant, the sky was covered in great black cloud. Fierce sheets of rain began to fall, accompanied by bolts of lightning. I pushed more power into my staff. I could feel it dragging the mana out of me from somewhere deep inside my body, and I let it do so freely. This time I visualized ice. I visualized stopping the movements of every molecule in the center of that town, dropping the temperature rapidly. Frost Nova. It was a spell I'd used many times before, but never with this much power, or on such a wide area. One after another, the drops of rain pouring down on the village froze solid. Layers upon layers of ice formed rapidly, consolidating into a single giant object. Finally, when it had reached the size of an iceberg, I stopped my spell. I wasn't done yet. I channeled more mana into my staff and created a rock in the sky above the village. Ignoring the mana cost, I steadily expanded its size until it was too huge to evade. Then I launched it straight down, with all the velocity I could impart. The rock slammed down in a fraction of a second. The ground trembled underneath my feet. An instant later, a thunderous boom reached my ears, followed by fierce winds and a shockwave. I shielded my eyes with my arm and stared down at my handiwork. The iceberg had been shattered, and 2/3 of the great rock was embedded into the earth. It seemed impossible that anything would have survived such an impact. Did I get him? There was no movement in the village. It seemed possible this really was really over. I certainly hoped it was. But an instant later, the great rock shattered. Yee! Somehow I could feel the man's murderous rage, even at this distance. A cold shiver ran down my spine. My legs trembled weakly, and tears formed in my eyes. As soon as I could move, I jumped into the magic armor, which was standing ready by my side. Just as I'd practiced hundreds of times, I fed power to all its individual components, took control of its limbs, and reached out to grab my staff. It took no time at all, but somehow the rage was already growing closer. With the startup routine complete, I turned my focus to my next attack. Mana surged out of me through my armor and into the staff in my right hand. I spurred the torrent on with every intention of draining myself dry. I was visualizing a nuclear explosion, pointing my staff in the direction of my enemy. I released the spell with all the ferocity I could muster. There was a brilliant flash at the center of the village, and a wave of heat and light swept across the ground. From the corner of my eye, I saw trees incinerate in an instant, reduced to charred shadows of themselves. A powerful shockwave followed a moment later. The magic armor I was wearing weighed several tons. It endured the heat and the shockwave without so much as trembling. Once the wave of devastation had swept fully past me, I looked down toward the village. A huge mushroom cloud was rising over it. I couldn't see the ground clearly under all the smoke and dust, but I'd fed that spell enough mana to obliterate everything in its radius. It was probably the single most powerful attack I'd ever used in my life. And yet I couldn't stop trembling in fear. I could still feel the rage, and it was far, far closer now. He was approaching me at a furious speed. We'd been so far apart at first, but now he was almost on me. I clenched my jaw to stop my teeth from rattling, squeezed my shaking hands tightly, and deposited my staff in the holder on my back. Then I mounted my Gatling gun on my right arm and picked my shield up with my left. When I paused to take a few deep breaths, I realized even my throat was trembling. Forcibly suppressing the fear and anxiety rising up inside me, I pointed my Gatling gun toward the cloud of dust that was rapidly approaching my position. I needed to keep the initiative. If I let him set the pace, I was done for. Had I even dealt him any damage? Had the poisons on the door or the aphrodisiac incense burner or any of the other traps had any effect at all? I'd put all the power I could into those 4 spells. I just hit him with. If they'd left him totally unharmed, it was hard to imagine this pseudo-Gatling gun would even scratch him. But for that matter, had my spells even landed? Surely he couldn't have evaded them. Their area of effect had been massive. I'd made them as huge and as deadly as I possibly could, and I fired them from so far away that he couldn't possibly have seen them coming, even with an eye of foresight, no matter what kind of demon eye he might possess. At that range, a human silhouette approaches. Fire! Shouting the command word, I activated the Gatling gun on my right hand. As mana flowed into it, the cannon immediately began to fire stone cannons at a ferocious rate of speed. So many bullets cut through the air that the sound of their whistling built into them like built into something like a scream. The fast-moving clumps of rocks slammed into their target, blowing away the cloud of dust that surrounded him and revealing a silver-haired man in a battered cloak, his face covered in soot. Was he hurt? Had my spells done anything at all? Yes, I could see blood trickling from his chin and something like a burn on the base of his neck. The damage was minor so far, but I could hurt him. Gah! Our eyes had met. His sharp, hawk-like gaze was fixed on me now. He had the look of a hunter who'd finally found his prey. He sidesteps in an attempt to escape the barrage of stones. Keeping my eye of foresight fully activated, I focused on anticipating Orsted's movements. The man was incredibly quick. so I was seeing a number of blurry, overlapping possibilities. Still, I tried to adjust my aim to cut off his attempts at retreat. The travel time for each individual projectile to reach its target was virtually non existent, but somehow Orsted evaded them as he saw them coming, gradually approaching me in the process. One step here, two steps there. Glaring at me as fiercely as a bird of prey, he was slowly but steadily closing the distance between us. Now and then a stone cannon would graze him and he'd grimace slightly, but that was about it. He seemed convinced that even a direct hit would not prove fatal. He seemed to be completely unafraid. From all appearances, my attacks were nothing special to him. From all appearances, he fought the likes of me on a regular basis. I felt very differently. His zombie-like calm and focus were terrifying to witness. I had a growing sense that none of my attacks would work on him, and it was a struggle not to give in to despair. Still, I was holding the advantage for now. Trying very hard to convince myself of this, I began to move in response to Orsted. When he stepped forward and to the right, I moved backwards to the left. When he zigzagged to the left, I retreated to the right. Anywhere he tried to go, I met him with a hail of stones. As long as I could keep this up, he'd never get any closer. I had the upper hand. It was going just as I'd visualized. In an attempt to ramp up the pressure, I used my left hand to cast a spell. My target was the ground beneath our feet, and the magic I had in mind was Quagmire. Quickly shaping the familiar spell, I raised my hand to activate it, but in the same instant, Orsted also raised his left hand at me. Disturb magic. My fully formed magic was reduced to a chaotic tangle of by a sudden surge of external power. The spell began to fade into a meaningless cloud of mana. Fucking hell. But I forcibly reformed it, pulling the strands back into their proper place. I was capable of this now. I'd finally learned how to do it. While teaching Sylphie how to use disturb magic, I'd also been training myself to counteract it, to complete a spell even after it was ruined. All those hours of practice had been worth it for this one moment. Orsted's eyes opened wide in surprise. Was this the first time he'd seen his disturb magic fail to... Whoa! The instant my Quagmire turned to the ground beneath his feet, to muck, Orsted used a spell of his own to overwrite it. He covered my swamp completely with an earthen plate, and now his right hand was pointed straight at me. I quickly answered with a disturb magic of my own. Brilliant light blots out the world. A jolt of fear ran through me, pausing my Gatling gun barrage for an instant. I leapt to one side with all my might. I can see the world again. There was now a deep, sizable crater at the spot where Orsted had been aiming. I hadn't even seen the attack itself. Was it some kind of fire spell, or maybe something stronger? Like gravity magic? That light I'd seen just now. Was that death? There was no time to think. Orsted was sprinting at me with one hand outstretched. Disturb magic wasn't going to work. He could counteract it just like me. I pointed both my hands at him, channeling mana through them simultaneously. My intention was to stop Orsted's advance with the Gatling gun, while also canceling out his magic with the Stone of Absorption. But as soon as I put this plan into action, I realized my mistake. Orsted's spell did dissipate, but at the same time, my stone projectiles also dissolved into clouds of sand as they left my gun. Seizing this brief window of opportunity, Orsted closed in quickly. What a fucking dumbass. You didn't think to test that? With his right hand still outstretched towards me, he pulled his left arm back to his waist, then flung it viciously toward my heart. Nyeh! On pure instinct, I took evasive action, using both my legs at once. I launched myself directly backward with all the force and speed I could muster. Oh, shit, that hurts. Just doing the and the goos. It's like fucking sending jolts of pain throughout my head. I wasn't quick enough. Orsted's fist slammed into my breastplate. A whistling sound filled the air, and I watched him shrink into the distance at a ferocious speed. Soon, the whistling gave way to crashing, crunching noises from behind me, and the world was full of dancing trees. So this is what it feels like to get knocked into next week. Just as this thought flashed through my mind, I slammed into a huge tree, bringing my flight to a halt. The sudden deceleration hit me like a hammer. I felt like all my internal organs had been smashed apart. My vision began to dim, but I recovered quickly. The magic circles Cliff had carved into the inside of my armor had healed my wounds automatically. When I looked down at my chest, however, I found that my breastplate was badly dented and had very nearly cracked in half. That crack was gradually repairing itself, but the process was painfully slow. Still, at least it had protected me from one blow. It was a good thing I'd taken the time to make this piece of armor particularly thick and strong. That familiar murderous rage was already bearing down on me again. Orsted was rushing straight at me, looking to deal a finishing blow. Quickly activating my Gatling gun, I fired a hail of deadly stones in his direction. He dodged them nimbly and extended his right hand at me once again. At this rate, things were going to play out just like last time. That was a major problem. My armor had been severely damaged by a single blow. If he landed more hits on me, he'd eventually punch straight through it. What were my options? Dueling him with magic wasn't going to work. I could cancel out his disturb magic, but the man clearly had some means of resisting magical damage, just like Moore. And I didn't even know what kind of spells he was throwing at me. I was at a disadvantage in a ranged fight then. That meant I'd have to try my luck in closer range. It was the only option I had left. I had to trust the power of the magic armor. I had to smack him down with raw strength. I sprayed another barrage from my Gatling gun to keep Orsted pinned down and charged forward, letting out a wordless battle cry. Orsted pulled his right hand back to prepare for my attack, leading with the shield on my left arm. I powered myself straight forward with both of my legs. My intention was to slam right into him like a battering ram. Orsted assumes a water god style stance. The instant I saw this with my eye of foresight, I swung my shield forward, stabbing in his direction with the blade mounted at its tip. This was a sword that did more damage to enemies with powerful defenses. Maybe it would work. My body slammed into Orsted with a loud metallic clang. It felt like I'd smashed right into a wall, but the impact sent him flying backwards, and there was blood spraying from his arm. His eyes, still fixed on me, were burning with hatred and anger. This was my chance. Whipping my Gatling gun into position, I quickly fired a barrage of stones. They slammed into him in midair, tearing what remained of his clothing apart and revealing a bruised and battered body underneath. There were burns, cuts, and scrapes all over him. My stone bullets struck his exposed skin repeatedly, sending fresh spurts of blood into the air. Finally, Orsted smashed into the ground with a mighty crash. I could do this. I could kill him. As long as I could land direct hits, my spells could do plenty of damage. Yes, the stones had bounced off him, but they'd torn at his skin and left him bleeding. Eventually, that would be enough to kill him. If I could just hurt him badly enough right now before... It seems I have no choice. Somehow I heard him speak those words, even at a distance, even as my stone bullets screamed through the air. In that instant, the air went cold. My body shivered uncontrollably, as if I'd suddenly stepped into a frigid tundra, and then my eye of foresight stopped seeing Orsted, although he was clearly visible to my other eye. Before I could make sense of this moment, he vanished completely. Yee! Struck by a sudden intense jolt of terror, I wrenched my body into a rightward leap. In that moment, there was a sharp clang from my left side. When I looked over, I saw Orsted standing next to me with a katana-like sword in his hands. From all appearances, he'd just finished swinging it. I also saw the left hand of my armor slice cleanly from its arm, fall to the ground with a weighty thump. Before I could even react, Orsted let out a more fearsome, ear-splitting bellow. The force of the cry left my body stunned and numb. It was vocal magic, the specialty of the beast folk. For an instant, I wavered on the edge of unconsciousness, but at the very last moment, I managed to pull myself together and jump to the side. Kicking off the ground so hard he left a crater in his wake, Orsted leapt after me in pursuit. I turned my Gatling gun toward him, but just as I was activating it, he swung his sword for the second time, slicing it in half. Broken pieces of the magical implements fell uselessly to the ground. I still had my right arm, at least. There was a long, deep groove in the surface of its armor, but it hadn't been close enough to cut through it entirely. Orsted was right in front of me now, his sword still low from the strike. I immediately channeled mana into my right hand. In the same moment that I fired off my strongest version of my spell, Electric, I swung my armored fist ruthlessly at his face, but instead of striking home with a crunch, I felt my blow slide harmlessly away from its target. Somehow, Orsted's sword was pressed up against my arm, and behind him electricity was crackling loudly through the forest, igniting the undergrowth and breaking large trees apart. He'd redirected both my spell and my punch. The instant I finally understood this, his sword moved slightly. Gah! The right arm of my armor fell to the ground with my actual arm still inside it. Oh, okay, it wasn't... So it's kind of a that. Sorry. The pain was overwhelming, but I didn't even have time to grimace. Even as he followed through on his strike, Orsted was pressing the attack again. I couldn't respond. I couldn't do so much as brace myself. His kick caught me square in the stomach. A horrible metallic squeal rang in my ears. I was lifted briefly off the ground. All the force of his attack had passed straight through the armor to my body. The blow to my stomach sent gastric juices up my throat and out my mouth. My vision was blurred with tears, but as I fell heavily on my rear, I aimed the stump of my right arm at Orsted and fired a shockwave at him. Orsted swung his sword in the air. I heard a boom as he did so, but that was his only reaction to my attack. By the time I figured out that he'd cut the shockwave itself apart, his foot had smashed into my face. My neck creaked ominously, and a jolt of intense pain ran from my head down to my shoulders. Without even realizing it, I'd fallen flat on the ground. After hurriedly raising to a sitting position, I managed to get back on my feet, only to see Orsted standing right in front of me with his sword held high. I was going to die. Purge! Purge! On sheer reflex, I managed to scream the command word. The magic armor's rear panels instantly sprung off, pulling me along with them. A split second later, Orsted cut the empty suit clean in half. I hit the ground hard, and my body tumbled for some time before finally coming to a halt. I couldn't see what Orsted was doing. I was out of options. It was open. Oh, no, it was over. Get! My whole body was racked with pain. The man had only kicked me a few times, though. A few times through my armor. But it felt more like I'd been pummeled with a bat for hours. My chest hurt, my stomach hurt, my right arm hurt, my neck hurt, my back hurt. It was painful just to breathe. For some reason, I could barely even move. I felt more exhausted than I'd ever been in my entire life. Oh, is this what it feels like when your mana runs dry? Ugh. Orsted's eyes had turned to me. I flinched in fear. My armor was gone. I had to run or he'd kill me here and now. Wait. My right hand. Where's my right hand? The kick landed before I even saw him move. I tumbled backward, my body screaming in agony. I landed face down in the dirt, struggling to breathe. I turned onto my back, and a foot slammed down into my chest. A groan of pain forced itself out of my throat. My body felt like it was burning up, but there was something cold pressed against my throat. Glancing over, I saw that it was Orsted's sword. God damn it. I'm really going to die. All that, and it still wasn't enough. So it's you, Rudius Grey Rat. Last I heard, you'd settled down and started a family. Why would you come for my head? It seems Orsted didn't intend to kill me immediately. Maybe it was because he spared my life once already, or maybe he just knew I wasn't capable of continuing the fight. The man god said, So you're one of his disciples after all. Die then. He took his foot from my chest and raised his sword. He said, You are going to destroy the world, and my descendants will help you kill him one day. Orsted paused at this. What? The man god told me he's fighting you because he wants to protect the world. He said that if I killed you, he wouldn't hurt my children or my family. I turned onto my belly and reached toward Orsted's foot, clinging to it, rubbing my face against it. I began to plead with him in a loud, desperate voice. This is the only thing I could do now. Please, don't destroy the world. You can kill me, I don't care. Just don't take my children. Don't take away their future. Please, this is the first time I've ever been so happy. Please just leave the man god alone. I'm begging you. Tears streamed down my face. I was a powerless failure, and now I'd lost my dignity. Pathetic. Just pathetic. What's the matter with me, damn it? I can't do that, I'm afraid. The moment I heard those words, I bit furiously at Orsted's foot. To be fair, this is kind of a badass image. He just fucking bites into his foot like a motherfucker. At the same time, I raised the bleeding stump of my right arm off the ground, channeled all my remaining mana into it, and ordered it to explode. If I had to die at least, I'd take this bastard with me. Disturb magic. A sharp kick sent me flying. With my focus broken, the mana I'd gathered dissipated uselessly. It was a struggle just to stay awake now. If I used any more mana at this point, I could tell I would instantly fall unconscious. You may possess a lapless aspect, and the massive well of mana that comes with it, but casting so many powerful spells in quick succession will drain you dry. As he spoke, Orsted bent down and reached his hand toward me. I'm gonna die. He's gonna kill me. But if I die, he won't die. And if he doesn't die, then Lucy will, and Roxy and Sylphie. I can't let that happen. I can't let him beat me. I have to win. But my body wouldn't move. And I'm out of mana. Blood was pulsing steadily out of my severed arm. My thoughts were growing vague and sluggish. The world seemed to be getting dimmer. Orsted's hand drew closer until it was all that I could see. Damn it all! I should have picked a name at least. All of a sudden, Orsted leapt away from me. Looking up, I found someone else had come between us. It was a tall woman in dark pants and a stylish jacket. In her hand, she held one-handed sword with a silvery blade, but her back was turned to me, so I couldn't see her face. Ah, wait, I recognize that hair. It was wavy and came down all the way to her waist, and it was vibrant, fiery shade of crimson. Sorry I'm late, Rudius. Eris Greyrat was standing in front of me. And that's where we're going to end everything. Holy shit. God, this is the worst my sinuses and my temples and my eye have all felt. The absolute worst. Fuck. I know I've got exercises to do, but Jesus Christ, I'm in pain. Give me a second, guys. I gotta get up and do some stuff real quick. Fuck. I'm gonna take a pain pill. Toby, are you here? Toby? go. Took a pain pill. Hopefully that'll kick in soon. Let me mark that down. Holy cow. She's gonna beat Rudy up. What a cliffhanger. Oh, I knew where this was ending, and I was like, well, shit. So you'll have to wait a week for that. Bro, if you think the anime isn't ending there on a cliffhanger for whatever episode this gets up to, emotionally and physically, bro. Yeah, it's gonna get crazy. Guys, I'm gonna have to delay the exercises until tomorrow. I am just it was a fight to continue that chapter. Yeah, my head is pounding. This whole side of my head needs like to just depressurize. Um I will take a look at everything that got redeemed and I will do those tomorrow at the end of Anime Church. So please look forward to that. It's just 40 of everything. Hi, Toby. Hi, could you like step off? You're standing on my headphones. Thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. I love you, Toby. There you go. We even got a little bit of Toby time right here. Yeah, there we go. Yes. Okay. That having been said, I really, really appreciate it. I will be on gaming stuff later, so I hope you're looking forward to that. And I got to go check out the trailers and stuff and that dropped for the Marvel panel. I already know about the DC stuff, so I'll have to look out for that. It's 50 on squats. There was an extra. Okay, cool. But yeah, I will see you guys later. Go ahead and let me know what you thought of this episode and all the chapters that we read. I'm curious to hear your opinions over on YouTube when this goes up. It'll probably be up tomorrow. Thank you guys so much. I really, really appreciate it. If you would do me a favor, if you like this type of content, please give us a like. If you if you think that what we do is interesting, then hit subscribe and hit that bell icon so you can get notified when we put up new content. But yeah, I'm really curious to hear what you guys think, and I know this is kind of like a this is kind of one of those really we're stopping here kind of moments. Yeah, we're stopping here. I can't continue, and that sucks because I kind of do wanna. But let me know down in those comments on YouTube. Thank you guys so much, and I'll see you later. Bye bye.